Morning, Manitoba, and welcome to December. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, and on YouTube. I hope you're toasty warm this morning, getting ready for a brand new week. Today's high in Winnipeg is minus 13. We're going to be cloudy, a 30% chance of some morning flurries. So with wind chill, it's going to feel like minus 27. So certainly cover up and don't expose the skin. Thanks for joining us. In Brandon, by the way, 30% chance of flurries, high minus 15 with wind chill minus 25 is how it'll feel. And Thompson, mix of sun and cloud. And once again, 30% chance, not of flurries, of light snow up in Thompson, but your temperature is going to fall to minus 23 this afternoon. So very cold up in Thompson today. Show is on till 8:37 a.m. And let's say good morning to the team. Corey Funk. Hello. Corey directs the program and we'll be on air covering the commute. Abby Adiemi behind the controls. Hello, Abby. Abby is our technical producer, and we'll be covering the weather on the air through the show. And Kevin Ipatebo. Hey, Kev, how you doing? Kev is our YouTube producer, so saying hello online. And that's where you can find us, online, on the radio, everywhere. Heather Wells is in our news center. She is here with developing news this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people grieving the death of a teenager killed by police in Norway House Cree Nation last month say they want real change. A community petition in Norway House calls on all levels of government to partner with the Indigenous community to build culturally grounded mental health infrastructure. It also calls for RCMP funding to be diverted towards supporting community-based responses. So we'll hear more about that. Also, some Manitoba Swifties want the singer to do more to get them into her shows. Taylor Swift's Eras Tour wraps up this week in Vancouver. We'll hear the experience of a couple of Winnipeggers. And our next local news coming up at 6:30.
Come on, Taylor.
Yeah.
Let us in. See you later. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, we'll hear the full details of that story. You can check it out online as well, by the way. Today, let's talk about what's coming up. We have a story in the first hour of the show about something that's being called the Foundation of the Future. We're going to learn more about the first modern Métis treaty with the federal government, and we'll hear who in Manitoba is talking about this. Also, the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs has a new annual report out about how prepared documents are to respond to calls across the country. So stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
John Adams doesn't compose your typical operas. Often they're about major events in modern history, like President Nixon going to China. The Pulitzer Prize-winning composer will tell you about his long career in music and why feeling is the driving force.
And that's what music is. It's fundamentally communicating emotion.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Joe Biden has pardoned his son. The U.S. president did an about-face, issuing a full and unconditional pardon for Hunter Biden. He would have been sentenced later this month after being convicted on federal gun and tax charges. Biden had previously said that he would not pardon his son for his crimes. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, what does this mean?
Yeah, this means Hunter Biden won't face any jail time after his father signed that sweeping pardon that absolves Hunter for all and any possible crimes he may have committed in the last 10 years. Now, this is a major reversal for President Joe Biden, who repeatedly promised he wouldn't interfere with his son's case, saying nobody is above the law. But apparently, when it comes to his family, that has now changed. And Biden's statement late last night almost sounds like something Donald Trump would say. Biden blames his political opponents and unfair prosecution, writing Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. Take a listen to political analyst Julian Zelizer.
He's worried about how Trump will use presidential power. And he's decided to reverse this and protect family. So I think President Biden is willing to live with the inconsistency and the change in position to protect his son.
Now, Biden reportedly made this stunning decision after spending Thanksgiving weekend with his family, and it marks one of his final acts as president before leaving office and public life.
So what's been the reaction to all of this?
Yeah, there's been harsh criticism on both sides of the aisle, accusing Biden of lying and hypocrisy. One Democrat saying Hunter Biden is a convicted felon and his case wasn't politically motivated. Incoming President Donald Trump also joining the chorus, calling it an abuse and miscarriage of justice. Trump even questioning if the pardon should include January 6 protesters. Trump takes office in just under 2 months, and Biden's pardon soon gives Trump the cover should he decide to pardon his allies.
All right, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. More than 200 additional deaths are being linked to residential schools in Ontario. The deaths were previously unknown to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or its successor. But the coroner's office began investigating back in 2021, shortly after potential unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, BC. Brett Forrester has more on the project.
We're bringing answers to families that never had them.
That's what it's all about for Provincial Police Sergeant Mark Makisock. He's the leader of the residential schools death investigation team at the Office of Ontario's Chief Coroner. And since 2021, his team's been parsing through public and protected records while consulting newspapers, genealogical databases, and ancestry websites, all to help those families find loved ones lost at Indian residential schools. Chief Coroner Dr. Dirk Heyer explains.
What we're doing is completely consistent with the work that was started by the Truth and Reconciliation, and we're carrying that forward in a way that provides more answers.
Heyer's office has now confirmed 220 additional deaths linked to the institutions in the province. Those deaths were previously unknown to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. The centre lists 436 deaths in Ontario, bringing the combined total to 656 to date. Significant, but no surprise to people on the ground like Laura Arndt. She's executive lead for the Survivors Secretariat, representing survivors of the former Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford, Ontario. In just 2.5 years, her group has more than doubled the number of known deaths there from 48 to 101.
That forensic nature being applied to records and documents, I think, is a critical skill set that's needed.
The Reconciliation Centre, meanwhile, says it supports the coroner's work and will continue to add names to its memorial as they're provided. Brett Forrester, CBC News, Ottawa.
Western leaders are calling for the conflict in Syria to de-escalate, but government forces are fighting fiercely to regain control of the northern cities of Aleppo and Idlib. Russian and Syrian government planes are launching airstrikes on the region, and there are reports Iranian-backed militias have also arrived in the country to support them. Our senior international correspondent Margaret Evans has more from neighboring Lebanon.
The Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has vowed to destroy the insurgents. Syrian and Russian airstrikes on rebel-held areas continuing. The Syrian White Helmets, a volunteer group based in opposition territory, released this video of their first responders putting out cars on fire after an airstrike reportedly hit near Aleppo's University Hospital yesterday. But it's clear the rebels' lightning offensive on the city took Damascus by surprise. The Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in control of much of Idlib province, led an offensive supported by other Turkish-backed opposition groups. Al-Assad's main supporter here in neighboring Lebanon, the militant group Hezbollah, has been weakened by its war with Israel, while another of his backers, Russia, which helped him retake Aleppo in 2016, is distracted by the war in Ukraine.
The Syrian civil war never ended, and it's been unfrozen by geopolitical events outside Syria.
Former British intelligence chief Alex Younger says rebel groups are clearly taking advantage of al-Assad's weakened state.
It took Bashar nearly 4 years to get Aleppo back, and he lost it in a day.
It's also led to reported fighting between the Turkish-backed rebels and US-backed Kurdish groups controlling parts of northeastern Syria, and credited with the defeat of ISIS. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Beirut.
Protesters clash with police on the streets of Tbilisi. Some throw fireworks as officers respond with tear gas for a fourth straight night. Georgia's capital has been overrun by anti-government demonstrators. They're angry over a decision to pause Georgia's efforts to join the European Union.
We've attended elections. It was clearly rigged. and we've done everything in our power so far to show that we desire a European future.
We don't want to be part of Russia. We want to be part of Europe, and we want to be part of the best life.
Tensions have been on the rise in Tbilisi since Georgia's election in late October. Many people there say the vote was rigged. They also accuse Russia of interfering in the election. The International Court of Justice is now hearing submissions in a landmark case on climate change. It's examining how countries should protect the environment from damaging carbon emissions and what the consequences should be if they do not. This case is something vulnerable island nations have been lobbying for years. ICJ opinions are non-binding, but they are legally and politically significant. More than 100 countries and organizations have signed up to make submissions in The Hague, and Canada is due to make its case tomorrow. The CEO of Rogers Communications will be in the hot seat today. He has been summoned to Ottawa by members of Parliament to address allegations of unfair business practices. This is the latest development in a story that began with our CBC Go Public team. CBC's Erica Johnson has more.
Rogers CEO Tony Staffieri likely knows he'll be grilled this afternoon when he testifies before the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. He was invited to appear last week, but was a no-show. Instead, sent another executive, firing up MPs like Conservative Michelle Rempel-Garner.
This committee needs to send a message to Canadian consumers that we're on their side, not the side of the CEO. We're done with this obfuscation.
Conservative MP Jeremy Patzer wasn't happy either.
The level of disrespect that the CEO is showing to Parliament, to Canadians, to ratepayers, to this institution is unbelievable.
NDP MP Brian Massey first called for Staffieri to appear, concerned, he said, after we reported hearing from hundreds of Canadians, many frustrated by clauses in contracts that allow price increases while they're locked in.
People, can't surf through on their phones endless pages of all these different types of clauses and expect to always pick them out from everything that they're purchasing and buying.
The CRTC is concerned too. Scott Hutton says the regulator's now holding public consultations.
To put in place new rules to actually correct the root cause of what's in the contract.
After Staffieri skipped the scheduled appearance, MPs issued a summons. A Rogers spokesperson says the CEO will attend this time, apparently by video conference. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News Anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app or on YouTube. Welcome to December. We will get into a full look at your forecast in just a moment here, but I can tell you that the hot spot in the province is -10, and that's Sprague. And Lynn Lake's the cold spot at -33. So Winnipeg's right at -13 degrees currently. This hour on the program, it's being called the Foundation of the Future. We're going to hear more about the first modern Métis treaty with the federal government, and we're going to hear Manitoba's place in it, so stay tuned. Also this hour on the show, aging equipment, a lack of specialized training for crews that fight wildfires in this country. Those are two of the big issues highlighted in a new report by the Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs. We're going to hear more about it. And love them or hate them, you got to do chores. How do you get the kids to pitch in? We've got a bit of a parenting column this hour. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells to update our news this morning. Hi there.
Good morning. Well, a Manitoba woman with no criminal charges spent a month in jail after public health officials ordered her detained to treat her tuberculosis, even though she wasn't infectious at the time. We're going to hear this story from our I-Team coming up. And communities in Manitoba's north can't wait for the ongoing postal strike to end. Lynn Lake's mayor says Canada Post is an essential service there. And Pimicikamat Cree Nation Chief David Monias says the First Nation has a small pharmacy, but other medical supplies come in by mail as well as other essentials. So we'll hear more on both those stories coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
Did you have a nice weekend, friend?
It was so beautiful. How about
good.
you?
I did. Yeah. You know what? I was talking with Corey, who's coming in actually, but we were talking about how that, the snow and the cold kind of came, and in December came, and now it feels like, okay, like it didn't come so early that I'm annoyed at it. It came so I'm enjoying it. Yeah, it was nice.
And you're very Christmassy. You've been singing Christmas carols already.
Yes, I might have been.
This
Sorry.
morning, yeah.
Sometimes I'm singing them. I don't even realize I'm singing them.
Aw, that's great.
Do you want to see this,
This is
though?
part of you.
Okay, Kevin, can we show the fire? I don't know if you'll see it on this shot here. Kev's going to try to pull this up. So look what Kevin did with our backdrop. Here, I'll move. Can you see it? Ooh. We've got the fire on the YouTube. That's the image behind me. So I was telling the guys, I'm going to look at that. It's like I'm warming my hands. I think we should do fireside chats with Auntie Marcy.
Yes,
right?
I'll come. Can I sit on your knee?
Come on in. Come on in, friend.
Okay.
I have some. I don't know that I can buy you everything you want, but I'll try. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you.
Heather Wells is not in studio with us. That's why, in case you're wondering why she's saying come on in, she's in the news center through the morning. We check in with her for headlines, of course, and latest news online anytime as things develop. Okay, 6:13. The person who has come in is Corey Funk. Hello, Cor.
Hello.
And Abby Adiyemi. Good morning.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. You really should be the guy that's over here because you're dressed in like that buffalo plaid red and black this morning. You're looking very Christmassy.
Officially counting down to Christmas.
Yeah. The weather today, freezing or what?
It's going to be a cold day with mostly cloudy conditions. We're going to see cloudy skies. There's a slight chance of flurries in the forecast in most of the regions. And then we'll see that breezy condition felt across the regions. Currently, Winnipeg, we are at minus 13. The forecast for today for both Winnipeg and the Red River Valley calls for mostly cloudy conditions. We do have this slight chance of flurries in the forecast. Winds will ease to light this morning. And then we're just going to stay at around that high of, it's going to be more like steady between minus 13 and minus 14 for the rest of the day. Tomorrow, tonight, that cloudy conditions continue, and then we'll see some light snow starting after midnight. In the western part of the province, we're looking at a cold day with mostly cloudy skies. Also, a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. The central regions will see mostly cloudy conditions and light snow, while the Parkland region just remains chilly with light winds. For the Power and Flin Flon, we have a snowfall warning there. We are seeing that heavy snow is expected later for that region. That region should be seeing about 10 to 15 centimeters once the system passes there. And then for Thompson and Churchill, it's going to be cold and light snow, which makes the region colder. But in comparison to Winnipeg, it's a bit milder than up north, but colder than, the southwestern part of the province. But right now we're at minus 13, and we're just going to stay there for most of the day.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And Corey Funk, good morning.
Good morning.
You got your tree this weekend.
We did. We went and got the tree. It was so fun.
You've got such a good picture of yourself with a tree on your shoulder. You look very classic
Yeah,
dad.
well, we brought a wagon to put the tree in, but then my son insisted on sitting in the wagon, so I had to carry the tree on my shoulder.
Do the work, Pops.
Exactly. So, yeah, it was fun. It was good.
How's the commute today?
So far, pretty good. Actually, on my run in today, I noticed the bike lanes on the way here are all plowed. So I wonder if that is the case elsewhere in the city. Do call with updates. We'd love to hear more of that, as well as some ski trails are starting to form. I heard in Riding Mountain. They're groomed now, too. They're starting to groom in Riding Mountain. And I saw people even just making their own ski trails in Wildwood this weekend as well at the golf course. So love to get trail updates because it's that time of year where people love to hit those ski trails or any other trails. But also on the roads, highways are looking okay. Things are looking all right in the city as well. But if you see something going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. Let me know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Well, history was made in Winnipeg this weekend. For the first time ever, the federal government signed a modern-day treaty with a Métis government. The treaty formally recognizes the Manitoba Métis Federation as the government of the Red River Métis. MMF President David Chartrand says this commits Canada to working with them on a government-to-government basis, regardless of who is in charge in Ottawa. When speaking to reporters on Saturday, Chartrand said the treaty is a dream come true for him and for many others.
It feels such a massive weight off our shoulders, massive support on this particular treaty has been a dream of ours. We waited 154 years to achieve, to get here. And imagine 154 years of never giving up and ongoing, pursuing to make sure that you establish your position as a people and where do you fit into a country you're help building. So from our perspective, it's a proud, proud day for our people. And I could attest to that. Yesterday, we got calls by the hundreds and hundreds to our office, all with pride, some with tears, some just overjoyed on the premise of finally we're there. Finally, we're correcting historical wrongs. And then now we know a future. Well, truly it means that people may quit calling me an organization or a group, and they'll start treating me like a government, and sitting down from a government ideology changes the very perspective of any negotiations. But from our perspective, it really sets the framework of the new relationship. And treaties, some may take lightly, are not to be taken lightly. Treaties mean a lot in the context of enshrining the relationship between yourself and the government. Government to government is what the entire premise of this particular government is in embracing. So when we look at it, we say to ourselves, now we can start to really sit down and talk about the future, such as health care. We are suffering greatly right now in health, but we're also doing very well, however, in economic development and housing. So some of our plans and ideas may be of help to Canada in their struggles as they move forward. So I think it's a win-win for both, and definitely from our government, it truly opens the door for a better relationship with Canada and a more secure relationship with Canada.
That is David Chartrand, the president of the Manitoba Métis Federation. Now, many of the attendees on Saturday's signing in Winnipeg were proud to be Métis, including Roger Smith. To him, treaty, he says, is a reminder of a family past that's marked by loss and how far he and his community have come.
St. Madeleine is my heritage home, where my grandparents and my great-grandparents tried to settle until they got kicked out of the community pasture to make room for cattle. Their houses were burned, their dogs were shot. So sitting there listening to Dave Chartrand this morning talking about what happened to our people, that hit my heart. That's why I'm here today. I'm very proud to have that there today from where I come from, what story I just told you, to be here for them. I tell my stories to my family all the time. It's emotional, yes, and it should never have happened. I see people on Winnipeg streets are homeless, but they don't have to, not all of them have to be. We had to be.
For a lot of people, this was a signing of a paper, but this carry a lot of significance.
Oh, it's going to carry big time. It's going to take time. We can't just, for example, they offered us, we're going to get back St. Madeleine, so they started off with 100 acres, okay? Well, 100 acres better than nothing, start. Okay, let's keep working. Let's keep getting. We will get that back, and that's a lot of land back there. And I'm not sure exact acres or anything, but it is a very big number.
Mr. Chartrand described this as a sort of a framework agreement for future agreements, right? There's still the question of land settlement.
It'll come into play.
Right, so,
and with our Premier Rob Canoe, if he's as sincere as he said he is, we should have no problem. Right, and if the ministers, from the Prime Minister, whoever wants to be Prime Minister next to our next government, they better recognize that this is something you cannot change anymore. Today, we have educated people, we have lawyers.
Do you think that this addresses all the wrongs that have been committed historically?
No, there's so many things to go. We haven't even touched a residential school. We haven't even touched the school system. We haven't touched the church catechisms that I used to go to. Nothing like that happened to me, but it happened to our elders, a lot of them, and not even elders.
So, a lot of work to be done.
Exactly. So a lot of those things should be corrected, hopefully. And yes, somewhere down the line there will be compensation of some sort, somewhere, sometime. It might not be my lifetime, but my children, my grandchildren.
With that being said, how does it feel to be at Red River Métis?
100%, always have been, always will be till I die.
Roger Smith, Métis, speaking on Saturday night at the treaty signing in Winnipeg. For more on the story and the history, please go to our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Breaking news happens anywhere, anytime.
Police have warned the protesters repeatedly, get back.
CBC News brings the story to you as it happens.
Hundreds of wildfires are burning.
Be the first to know what's going on and what that means for you and for Canadians.
This situation has changed very quickly.
Helping make sense of the world when it matters most. Stay in the know. CBC News.
Well, you just heard the headline in that clip. Staying in the know with CBC News. Hundreds of wildfires are burning. The recognizable voice of Adrian Arsenault there. In 2024, the year where Canadians watched Jasper burn, among other communities. This morning, there's a new report out. The Canadian Association of Fire Chiefs is not feeling very prepared about the wildfire season in 2025. So their report, 2024 State of Fire and Emergency in Canada report, was released today. In it, there are serious concerns about glaring gaps in national firefighting coordination, aging equipment, and lack of training. The chiefs also say that firefighting resources nationwide are not keeping up with the potential demands of housing development. Greg Jones is a board member of the Canadian Fire Chiefs Association and the Director of Fire Services for the town of Amherst, Nova Scotia. This morning, he's in Ottawa. He will be meeting with the federal government officials about this report. Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
It's interesting because you and I spoke last year about your last year's report, and I mean, it doesn't seem like there's been a lot of headway on the main issue. Can you tell us about the overall lack of fire preparedness in Canada right now through the lens of this report?
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Marcy. And I will say, unfortunately, I'm echoing the same comments I had last year, to be very honest. We still have the same issues. However, the issues are starting to grow. Again, for season 2025, we're very concerned about wildfires, not just the big campaign fires, but also the fires that happen inside the urban zones. But we've had other issues. Rapid housing development is affecting the fire service now as well. Potential for communities having fire protection ratings downgraded because of aging and outdated equipment. Fires due to lithium-ion batteries and explosions and aging equipment. And also the glaring policy gaps and miscoordination at the federal level. One thing that we do know, and one thing that we fully recommend and are very transparent with the federal government on, is we need a national fire administration for right across the country. And we need someone in Ottawa that can deal with policy at a moment's notice and ensure that the fire service is not forgetting when new policy is put in place. Housing is an example of that, unfortunately. Wildfires is an example, and those are only two. There's multiple different issues.
What's the resistance when you meet with the feds and you propose that you need this national coordination and this, national, I guess, head to deal with this on as you said, incident to incident basis?
Yeah. The unfortunate part is I really can't answer that question, but what I can tell you is that our association has a turnkey approach. We have a turnkey plan to help the federal government move forward with ensuring that there's a national fire administration. I don't know if the government's trying to find the best possible setup to make this happen, but fire chiefs will be on the Hill this week, and our number one goal is to help government, to educate government on the true needs of having a national fire administration, and also help them get it across the finish line.
Now, I know that how you put this report together is a survey of 3,200 fire departments that goes out in the spring. You've said a couple of times that one of the big things in this is the lack of fire and emergency resources to kind of keep up with the new housing developments. What more can you tell us about that?
One thing I can say is that fire departments across our country, they'll do whatever at a moment's notice to help their communities no matter what. But one thing that we do know from our report again this year is that fire departments are deferring budgetary needs for buying new equipment. And unfortunately, as their equipment ages, it affects the ability to do proper fire protection. It affects your fire protection rating in communities. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, it affects the property owners and what they pay for insurance at the end of that. So for us, getting aging equipment replaced is a big deal. We know municipalities in many cases struggle to do that, especially in rural areas. So one thing we're going back to the federal government on again is ask for a modernized version of the Joint Emergency Preparedness Program. This was a fund in 2013 that was taken away that used to help fire departments and municipalities buy equipment but offset the expenditure. And unfortunately, equipment for fire service is getting more extremely expensive now. We need a coordinated effort to move that forward.
The rising percentage of Canadian communities that are at risk of losing their, quote, fire protection rating is discussed in the report. You've alluded to this. But why is that so important? What does that actually mean?
Every community across our country gets a rating. It's called a FUS rating, and it's a rating for their fire protection rating for their whole entire community. The reason why it's so important is as equipment ages in the fire service and funding is not available for staffing levels and others, it affects that rating right across the country. And it also affects what the property owners have to pay, unfortunately. So one thing we're going to federal government on is asking for the coordinated effort through a National Fire Administration, but also the modernized Joint Emergency Preparedness Program to offset the cost for municipalities so they can buy firefighting equipment to meet the demands now and well into the future. Because unfortunately, the price of firefighting equipment continues to go up and up and up year after year.
We'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you very much.
That is Greg Jones, board member of the Canadian Fire Chiefs Association and Director of Fire Services for Amherst, Nova Scotia. We reached him today in Ottawa, though he will present the findings of this latest report to the federal government.
This winter, help us make the season kind by supporting Harvest Manitoba. I'm Vince Barletta, CEO of Harvest Manitoba. All it takes is one can of food, $1, or even 1 hour of your time. Join CBC as we donate a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba December 6th. Find ways to give to Harvest Manitoba at cbc.ca/kindmb.
So that is coming up on Friday, December 6th already. That's Friday. Make the season kind all day here. Our special programming, music, stories, and just coming together if you have it to give. I know I spent some time at Harvest last Thursday morning. They have a food bank there on site every Thursday morning. They primarily are that's the warehouse where they collect items and put it out to different organizations and to food banks. But there is an on-site food bank that happens at Harvest as well every couple of weeks. So I spent some time there and met some people using the food bank. And let me tell you, it was sobering to hear how this year in particular has been affecting people. The first few people I met had lost jobs. One of them because her family, she had a mother who became sick and she had to leave her job. So I shouldn't say lost job. She had to leave her job because she needed to caregive for her mother because that was needed in her life. And so she just couldn't make any headway in feeding her family. She has a son. And then I met another gentleman who lost his job, I think it was 1 year ago. And he was talking about how he tries to make things stretch and how, bread was a luxury just given the costs of everything. So it was really, just one of those times where you just realize you do the stories with the stats every year, especially this year about inflation and we talk about jobs. But when you really sit down with people and realize how many people are affected and how deeply, it's a moment. So let's have a moment together as a community on Friday as we come together to make the season kind. It is not minus 18 in Winnipeg right now. Our high today is going to be minus 13. We're going to be there around most of the day. If you have any problems out there on the roadways, please call us on the morning commute, whether you're walking or driving or biking. 788-3093 is where you can reach us. And that's for Winnipeg or wherever you are in the province. Let us know what we should update. Business news is going to be updated right after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg at 6:30. Depending where you are in Winnipeg, you are really feeling the chill this morning. Minus 18, as Marcy said, out at the airport. It's minus 13 in downtown Winnipeg, and that, as she mentioned, is our high today. Imagine being thrown in jail and strip searched, all because you didn't take your medication. It happened to a Manitoba woman with tuberculosis. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout explains.
Geraldine Mason has never been charged with a crime and has had no involvement with the criminal justice system. So imagine what it would have been like for her to be thrown in jail for 32 days, all because she had tuberculosis and missed a couple of doses. TB, as it's known, is a serious illness that mainly affects the lungs. It can be deadly if not treated. Mason regularly took her medication, but sometimes would miss a dose here or there. Public health officials were concerned if she went without treatment for too long, her disease would become resistant to medication. So they got an order to put her in jail, alongside violent offenders.
I was scared, obviously. I was in my room most of the time, which sucked.
Her lawyer said there were other options, like placing her in hospital or working with health officials in her community of God's Lake. Mason was supposed to stay in jail for 3 months, but was released on Thursday after her lawyer filed an application.
I'm super excited. I can't even wait to get home.
Now, a health official will FaceTime her every day to make sure she takes her pills. Why that wasn't an option before is unclear. Caroline Bargood, CBC News, Winnipeg.
People grieving the death of a teenager killed by RCMP in Norway House Cree Nation last month say they want real change. RCMP say the boy was holding an edged weapon and didn't stop moving forward towards police despite being told to stop. But family and community members say police should have used other methods to subdue him. Jonathan Meikle helped organize a walk in Norway House.
That we need to come together and work together, and we need our youth to understand this more than ever, that we're all part of this collective healing, and that there's a lot of work to be done.
A community petition calls on all levels of government to partner with Indigenous communities to build culturally grounded mental health infrastructure. It also calls for RCMP funding to be diverted towards supporting community-based responses. Northern Manitoba communities hope the ongoing postal strike ends soon. Pimachikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monias is paying close attention to the latest developments. He says the First Nation has a small pharmacy, but other medical supplies come through the mail. People in his community, he says, also rely on Canada Post for the delivery of checks of social assistance, pensions, and health benefits.
We have critical supplies that come in for our nation, and we really rely on postal services to deliver those necessities.
The province has opened locations to drop off and pick up essential mail like checks. Canada Post also says in a statement it has presented the Canadian Union of Postal Workers with the framework to reach a deal and end the strike. Some fans of Taylor Swift aren't shaking this one off. They couldn't get tickets to one of the final shows of the Eras Tour. Swift's tour wraps up in Vancouver this week, following 6 shows in Toronto. Kyra Lang lives in Lockport. She says she signed up for all the pre-sales for both shows, had 25 to 30 friends do so as well on her behalf, and even with the help, she couldn't get a code to buy a ticket, nor did anyone else she knows, but she says lots of scalpers did.
They're on StubHub. People are already trying to sell them for like $2,000 for the nosebleeds. And like as a huge fan and someone like I haven't seen Taylor since her Fearless tour back in like 2010. So I was literally 10 years old the last time I saw Taylor.
Lang wants the federal government to step in and regulate ticket prices so corporations like Ticketmaster can improve the buyer's experience and help eliminate scalpers. It's one of the sounds of winter. Skating at the Forks. Ashton Sutherland was among Winnipeggers hitting the ice on the Forks Canopy rink for the first skate of the season.
I just love hockey. I love skating. Been playing it since I was a child. Why not? Perfect weather, right?
Sutherland hopes for colder winter season than last year's, so the ice stays just right for skating. Well, it wasn't just right. Ending the road trip on a slide.
Puck shot, score! Tipped in front, and Lowry has opened the scoring. It's 1-0 Jets.
Adam Lowry in the first period on TSN, Winnipeg's only goal of the game as the Jets fall 3-1 to the Dallas Stars. Jets head coach Scott Arniel says this road trip has been a tough slog.
It's tough. I mean, we're in a grind right here of the heavy part of the kind of the schedule, what's happened. It doesn't get any easier. And, yeah, I mean, we're happy with the compete and the battle and, you know, certainly a 1-1 game, going up to 7 minutes left in that into the third. And it just, we have to find ways to, make the difference there, and we just didn't.
The 6-game road trip is now done. The Jets return home to face the St. Louis Blues tomorrow night. You can find more on this story as well as other news from Manitoba. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on now in our regional forecast. Abby is back, has all the details. Hello.
Hello. We're looking at chilly one with light snow across the province, but Winnipeg would be kind of calm today. We're going to feel more like a weather we can call manageable. Okay, currently Winnipeg minus 13, partly cloudy conditions. We're seeing now that the forecast for today calls for mostly cloudy skies. We do have a slight chance of flurries in the forecast and a high of about minus 13, though it's going to feel breezy at times, and that's a similar condition for the central region of the province. Heading west, Brandon is currently at minus 18. Mostly cloudy conditions we're seeing for the Westman region today. We should see this mainly cloudy skies to hang around, and then we have a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. Light winds will come with that. A cold ahead. You get to a high of minus 15. Dauphin is sitting at minus 19 and mostly cloudy at this time. For the Parkland region, we're looking at mainly cloudy conditions with a slight chance of flurries in the forecast and some light winds, and highs will be around minus 13. If we head into the Interlake region, Gimli is currently at minus 12. Today's forecast calls for mainly cloudy conditions, a slight chance of flurries. Winds will ease to light this morning, and then we'll see highs near minus 13. For the north in the Power and Flin Flon, we're looking at temperatures around minus 23, which is chilly. We're going to see periods of light snow today and winds, and we'll see highs around minus 15, though we don't have that snowfall warning in effect for that region. The forecast says about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow expected once this system passes through, and that should be around the afternoon period into tonight. Moving to Thompson, where it's minus 21 and partly cloudy, we're going to see a mix of sun and clouds today. We do have a slim chance of light snow this morning. Winds will be light. Temperatures will dip to minus 23, so you might want to bundle up accordingly for folks in Thompson. While in Churchill, it is minus 21. We're seeing ice crystals in that part of the province. Expect mainly cloudy skies, a good chance of light snow this morning, and you will be staying steady around minus 19. For Winnipeg, once again, it is minus 13.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, anything you're noticing on the commute?
Yeah, one thing to keep an eye out for if you are up in the Thompson area today, there's those highways still being reported as covered or partly covered, particularly from Thompson to Lynn Lake, as well as from Thompson up to Gillam. So not ideal conditions up there. Here down south, the highways are looking okay so far, but if you're walking, biking, driving, you see something going on, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
I just posted on Facebook. You can call about this as well. What did you do the first weekend of December? Certainly felt holiday-ish out there already. Just lots of events going on, whatever you did. Did you do the tree, some decorating? Maybe if that's not, your background and not what you're doing, maybe you got out for dinner or did something else. Lots of events going on. Maybe you hit up a market or something. So what did you do the first weekend of December in Manitoba? How'd you spend it? 788-3205 as we get into our work week. Let's talk about business news. Crystalie Ramlichan's here with the report this morning. Hi there.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So we're about to get an update on how the big banks are doing. What are investors expecting?
Yeah, that's right. So most big banks in Canada are reporting their latest results this week. And fears around mortgages defaulting and a recession are easing. But analysts say the banks will still have to show they're going to grow enough to justify their current high valuations. So the S&P TSX Bank Index is up around 12% since last quarter's result. Now, the exception here is TD, which has been hit with a $3 billion fine and growth limits in the U.S. because of money laundering penalties, which we've talked about in the past. Now, the perception of Canadian banks has shifted notably from recent quarters where bank stocks were under pressure over concerns that defaults would spike as borrowers buckled under the strain of high interest rates. Lenders even started setting aside more money to, account for possible loan losses. So far, though, the job market has seen only a gradual softening, helping ease fears in the financial sector. And the Bank of Canada has been reducing interest rates, as we know, so that's helped as well. Now, analysts say borrowers have also been preparing for mortgage renewals by increasing monthly payments and reducing spending elsewhere. And that's helped keep mortgage delinquencies below pre-pandemic levels. But banks could face pressure ahead with lower immigration numbers and possible tariffs from the U.S. on Canadian imports. So Scotiabank kicks off earnings tomorrow, followed by National Bank and RBC on Wednesday, and then BMO, TD, and CIBC all report on Thursday.
Next up on the report today, you have some insight into what is worrying Canadian businesses.
Yeah, that's right. So a new report says inflation and employee burnout are the top concerns this year. The survey from the Healthcare of Ontario Pension Plan and Angus Reid Group says 78% of those surveyed say inflation has negatively impacted their business this year, and that's up from 71% last year. And 68%, so that's more than half, say employee burnout is hurting operations. And the two concerns are also topping the list for next year, with 72% of businesses saying they are concerned about those things for the future as well. Now, the report says almost 3/4 of businesses agree that the Canadian economy is experiencing a productivity crisis, and 90% agree that business productivity depended on employee productivity, and that obviously makes sense. And this report was based on an online survey that was conducted back in August, and it included 759 businesses.
Well, let's surf into your last story. One business that did really well this past weekend, the box office.
Yes, that's right. So Moana 2 made $221 million at the domestic box office in the first 5 days of its opening, leading to the biggest American Thanksgiving box office of all time. So we know the U.S. just had Thanksgiving down there. And of course, also contributing to that, the recent releases of Wicked and Gladiator 2. So theaters were not that hot this summer, but it seems like this trio of different film genres has something to offer for everyone right now. So Moana 2 overperformed compared to the $100 million analysts had initially expected. It marked the highest American Thanksgiving weekend performance of a film ever, beating out 2019's Frozen 2, which made $125 million during that period. And Wicked continues to soar. It's now the highest grossing Broadway adaptation of all time at the domestic box office. And this past weekend has helped narrow the gap from last year. So the box office has been hit hard following the labor strikes in Hollywood, which halted production and pushed many major blockbuster releases to next year and beyond.
What's up in the markets this morning?
In Europe, markets are higher as investors monitor the global economic and interest rate outlook heading into the final trading month of the year. Germany is up, the UK is up, France is down. In Asia, markets are trading mostly higher with investors focused on economic readings from several countries, including Japan, South Korea, and China. Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is up. Oil is up 88 cents to 68.88 US per barrel. Gold is down $5.80 to $2,643.30 US per ounce, and the dollar is down 0.15 of a cent to 71.3 cents US.
All right, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
That is our business news with Crystalie Ramlakan. Still ahead. How do you get the kids to do the chores? We've got a parenting column coming up. Stay with us. It's -13. It's partly cloudy, and we're going to be right around there, actually, for most of the day. Although I will say that at the airport in Winnipeg, it's -18, so a bit of a difference in temperature. Well, next in the show, we have a debut single from Winnipeg R&B artist Janet Jacobs. This is Sweet Nothings.
I tried to drink you away. I tried to sing you away. I tried to think of the ways we could have loved if you never left. Now it's you I can't forget. I tried to write you away, send you into outer space. I almost dug my own grave just to bury you so deep. Now you're hanging over me. What is it about you?
Shannon Jacobs and Sweet Nothings, Winnipeg R&B artist. It's her debut single. It is 12 minutes to 7 o'clock now on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Minus 13 in Winnipeg, minus 18 in Brandon, minus 22 in Thompson this morning. Thanks so much for joining us here on CBC. Well, next on the show, I was asking what people were doing on the weekend, but maybe you were doing chores. There's always a lot of them when you have a household. Washing and folding laundry, loading and emptying the dishwasher. Lots of the jobs are never ending. But if you've got kids at home, why not enlist their help? S. Bear Bergman is the author of Special Topics in Being a Parent, a queer and tender guide to things I learned about parenting, mostly the hard way. He spoke with Corey Funk all about chores.
Good morning.
So what do you see as the value of teaching your kids to do chores?
Well, for one thing, I think it helps them to be much more sensitive to their environment and their own impact on it. You know, a kid who knows they're going to have to mop the floor on Friday is going to make sure they pick up every blueberry they spilled on Tuesday. Because, right, they want to make less work for themselves. And I think over time that really begins to translate to making less work overall. You know, there's lots of conversation about, oh, I just don't know what I'm supposed to do, or I don't see the chores. And, you know, this is where children learn to see the chores. They learn how to predict what Tuesday's spilled blueberry will look like on Friday. But also, you know, I think we've reached the point in the world where we have to take seriously that part of raising children is sending them out into the world prepared to care for themselves and their environment, regardless of their gender. We have to send them out, you know, prepared to cook a meal and do their laundry and clean the bathroom and unclog a toilet and change their own tire. Not just because these are important skills for a functional adult to have, but also, you know, nobody makes friends more easily than the kid who can do a good cheesy scrambled eggs at 3 o'clock in the morning when everybody gets home, you know, from a night out at university. So let's set them up for success in all the ways, I feel.
Yeah, I love this because I have a 2-year-old now, and he's just at that stage where he's really wants to help with everything. Like, he insists, when I start making dinner, I want to help. He's not super great at it, but he's super motivated, like intrinsically motivated to get things done. But I know that's only a very short amount of time. He helps make pancakes. It's great. But I know eventually that motivation is probably going to wane a little bit. So what do you think about things like down the road paying for your kids to help with their labor?
You know, I really think that the thing that you've described, where when a kid starts to get enthusiastic, is that's the moment, right, to get them started helping and keep them helping, and also to talk to them. You know, I'm an ongoing fan of the idea that we are, you know, performing the tasks, but we're also talking about the values. And for me, a big value is we all benefit from this household, and therefore we all participate in taking care of it, right? You ate, you can clean up. You want clean socks, you can help mate socks. And I think that paying kids for chores is sort of not very well in line with the value of, you know, we all benefit, we all help. But also, once you make it a transactional labor negotiation, you are setting yourself up for the inevitable moment when, you know, your kid finds a $20 bill on the sidewalk or gets some money from their Aunt Petunia and then says, I'm not doing any chores for the next month. I already have as much money as I need. And then what? Right? Then either you have to reveal that, in fact, they are required to, regardless of whether they need money or not, and that really all along this was a values proposition and you just haven't really discussed it that way, or you have to do their chores for a month while they already have, and right, nobody wants that. Right. And so I think I'm not a great fan of that as a choice. I just don't think we want to go down that road. I like to keep it in the realm of, we all benefit from this household, and therefore we all help make it nice, and that is how it works.
But when is the right age to really start introducing, formal chores?
I mean, I think that you're in exactly right. I think 3, late 2, early 3 is just about right. And at that age, you're really breaking off a task of your larger chore to give to a little kid. But they can mate socks, they can sort silverware, they can crack eggs, fold washcloths, get a disinfectant wipe and get after the drawer pulls and the cabinet handles. They get the sense of satisfaction that they did a job, like they helped. But also I think it makes the work of keeping a household more visible to them. So it's helpful for them to kind of be with you while you do the chores, and they have their bit that they can help with. And as they get older, they can do more of the bits. It's always going to be iterative, but you can build them up to being both competent and reasonably helpful, in part because they know what to do and how to do it. And if they have 10 minutes, eventually, sometimes they'll just do it.
That'd be nice.
It's so great.
I'm looking forward to that day. But say that you're a parent who, for whatever reason, you just didn't get your kids doing chores, and now they're in their teens, and they're kind of stubborn about it. What is the move? What's your advice to parents whose kids are now older, but now you want to start getting them into the whole chore life?
The thing that I really notice about teens is that they are so sensitive to the balance between responsibility and authority in everything, right? And so my recommendation, if you have a teen and you're trying to get them into helping around the house, is to give them a chore where they can take as much of the authority as possible along with the responsibility. So like cooking dinner one night a week is a great option, because you can say, we would like you to cook dinner one night a week. Here's your budget. You get to pick what we eat on your cooking night. And I will tell you, there's nothing a teen, generally speaking, enjoys more than being able to make a decision for the rest of the family. And sometimes that is enough to get them excited. And, the first couple times they might, it might be chocolate chip pancakes and scrambled eggs. And honestly, I think that's okay. Eventually, most of them will start experimenting with other things, and when they settle in, some of them are quite surprised to discover that they like cooking, or at least they like the result. And then, once you're already a little ways down the road on helping and taking some responsibility, again, you can add some more chores. But I would encourage parents who are giving more chores to a teen, or especially new chores, to always think, what's the most authority I can comfortably give this kid to go with this new responsibility? I find it really decreases resistance.
I love that. Bear, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That is S. Bear Bergman, author of Special Topics and Being a Parent. He was speaking with Corey there about chores, how to get the kids involved. 3 minutes now to 7 o'clock. Heather Wells is back with more headlines this Monday morning.
Good morning. Well, a Manitoba woman with no criminal charges spent a month in jail after public health officials ordered her detained to treat her tuberculosis, even though she wasn't infectious at the time. We're going to hear this story from CBC's I-Team coming up. And some Manitoba Swifties want the singer to do more to get them into her shows. Taylor Swift's Era Tour wraps up this week in Vancouver. We're going to hear from a Winnipegger who now lives in BC and couldn't score tickets to the BC or the Toronto shows. What she wants to see happen, that's coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we're going to have actually a detailed look at that I-Team report about the Manitoba woman held in jail for a month. And so stay tuned because Caroline Bargout will join us with, as I mentioned, more detail. Plus, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau made a surprise visit to Florida this weekend to talk trade and tariffs with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. It's unusual to have a meeting like this before someone is officially sworn in, but it happened. So what was discussed? What do we know? Quite a lot, actually. So stay tuned. We'll analyze it. And right after 7 o'clock, World AIDS Day was yesterday. We're going to talk about how HIV/AIDS led to the HIV/AIDS epidemic, led to community building for queer Indigenous people in Manitoba. So not just here, but across the country. But we'll have that interview coming up from someone who lived through that. It is minus 13 in Winnipeg. Feels like a lot colder. We're going to be around minus 13 for the day, but with wind chill, it'll feel like minus 27 this morning. Mainly cloudy, chance of flurries. There is an issue in traffic here. Daniel called Highway 207 turning west onto number 1 highway at Deacon's Corner. Backed up. Crews are doing work at the intersection, so you lose a turning lane. Could be a little slow this morning, especially if you're coming to Winnipeg from Lorette. Thanks for the call, Daniel.
Today on The Current.
There was infidelity, there was some drug abuse, compulsive spending, and hidden debt.
The writer Jessica Waite was already in shock after her husband died of a heart attack, but there was more to come when she found that he'd been hiding a lot of very big secrets. A personal tale of complex grief coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Indian government officials in Canada allegedly intervened in the last federal Conservative race in an attempt to derail the campaign of Patrick Brown. That is according to information obtained by Radio-Canada. Brown was one of Pierre Poilievre's main rivals in that race. He is the mayor of Brampton, the Canadian city with the largest Sikh population. His stance in favor of that community upset Indian agents, according to our sources. Brigitte Bureau reports.
Today, I'm asking you to help me.
Ontario candidate Patrick Brown was the target of Indian interference in the last federal Conservative race. That's according to 5 people close to his campaign who spoke to Radio-Canada. We are not naming these sources because they say they fear for their safety. Brown's national campaign co-chair, Conservative MP Michelle Rampol-Garner, was allegedly pressured by Indian consulate officials to withdraw her support for the candidate. The MP shared this information with other members of the team during a conference call, according to sources who were on that call. Later, she quit the campaign. At the time, she said she was considering a move to provincial politics, which did not materialize. Brown and Rampol-Garner would not grant us an interview. In a written response, the MP said she left Brown's campaign of her own volition. She says in no instance was she coerced in any manner by anyone at any time. Our sources say supporters of the Hindu community were also told by Indian agents not to sell membership cards for Brown or invite him to events. The High Commission of India would not comment. Pierre Poilievre's office says it has no knowledge of Indian interference to undermine his rival. Poilievre is the only party leader in Parliament who still refuses to receive the necessary security clearance to access classified documents on foreign interference. Brigitte Bureau, CBC News, Ottawa.
It is still not clear when mediated contract negotiations will resume between Canada Post and the union. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says it has not heard from the mediator. He suspended the process last week after negotiations didn't budge. The union says both parties have adjusted their demands and are ready to restart talks. U.S. President Joe Biden has given his son a full and unconditional pardon. Hunter Biden was scheduled to be sentenced later this month on federal gun and tax charges. This is a controversial move in the final weeks of Joe Biden's presidency. He previously said he would not pardon his son, nor would he commute his sentence. The CBC's Katie Simpson has the latest from Washington.
U.S. President Joe Biden walked the streets of Nantucket with his family, including his son Hunter Biden, spending time together over the Thanksgiving holiday. It was during this break from Washington the president revealed he would grant his son a full and unconditional pardon. It comes as Hunter Biden was about to be sentenced on federal gun charges and separate tax evasion charges, crimes stemming from a dark time in his life dominated by addiction issues. It is a major reversal for Joe Biden. Both he and White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre had repeatedly said there would be no pardon.
It's still a no. It will be a no. It is a no, and I don't have anything else to add. Will he pardon his son? No.
In a statement, the president said he made the decision because he felt Hunter was unfairly singled out because he was the president's son in an effort to hurt Joe Biden politically. He blamed his political opponents in Congress, calling it a miscarriage of justice. Biden ended his statement by saying he hopes Americans will understand why a father and a president would come to this decision. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Washington.
The International Court of Justice is now hearing submissions in a landmark case on climate change. It is examining how countries should protect the environment from damaging carbon emissions and what the consequences should be if they do not. This case is something vulnerable island nations have been lobbying for years. Siosiwa Vekune is with the group Pacific Islands Students Fighting Climate Change.
An advisory opinion that approaches the climate crisis via a human rights lens is the ideal outcome for us, and that's rooting people in the solution. That's bringing the human rights discussion into these climate negotiations.
ICJ opinions are non-binding, but they are legally and politically significant. More than 100 countries and organizations have signed up to make submissions in The Hague. Canada is due to make its case tomorrow. In Syria, there are reports Iranian-backed militias entered the country overnight. The fighters are there to help the Assad regime regain control of the north. Islamist insurgents still control the cities of Aleppo and Idlib, but Syrian and Russian planes have been firing airstrikes on the rebels. Eyewitness video shows a major explosion near a hospital in Aleppo. It claims to be from yesterday, but that has not been independently verified. The White Helmets, an opposition-run rescue service, says at least 56 people have been killed in airstrikes since last Wednesday. There was unrest in Georgia's capital for a fourth straight night. Protesters in Tbilisi clashed with police over the country's decision to freeze its bid to join the European Union. They also say Georgia's recent elections were fraudulent. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing is following developments from London.
Water cannons doused demonstrators. They fired back at riot officers with firecrackers, lasers, and set small fires into the early morning hours. The protesters, mostly made up of young people, fear Georgia is turning back to its Soviet roots.
I'm here for a very simple reason, to defend my European future and the democracy of my country.
We don't want to be part of Russia. We want to be part of Europe, and this is our very, very first demand.
Last week, the governing Georgian Dream Party said it was freezing talks with the European Union until 2028. That led to condemnation inside and outside the country. On Sunday, the Prime Minister, Irakli Kobakidze, walked that back.
So we have not suspended anything related to the European integration. It's just a lie.
The Georgian Dream Party's election win in October is another pressure point for demonstrators. It has been overshadowed by claims of fraud and foreign interference, concerns echoed by the European Parliament. It adopted a resolution saying the election was not free or fair and expressed concerns over democratic backsliding in Georgia. On the streets Sunday night and into this morning, police worked to move demonstrators away from Parliament. They had grabbed anything in sight to build barricades. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
At least 56 people are dead in southeast Guinea after a soccer match turned deadly. A controversial refereeing decision upset the fans. Some started throwing stones. People ran away, causing a stampede. One official told Reuters news agency many of the victims were minors. They got caught in the crush of people after police started firing tear gas. The government is promising to investigate. Exclusive data analysis by CBC shows 2024 will be the worst year for Ontario emergency room closures. Some rural hospital ERs have become daytime-only operations. The CBC's Julie Ireton tells us exactly how many hours ERs were closed over the past 3 years.
You'd love to be number one, but not in this contest.
Brenda Scott is co-chair of the Save the Chesley Hospital Committee. It's in southwestern Ontario. Chesley's ER tops the list with the highest number of hours closed. That emergency department, like others across the country, has cut its hours. It's closed every night and on the weekends.
I think it's challenging to call a center an ER if it's closing during certain parts of the day.
Dr. David Savage researches these closures. He's a physician in Thunder Bay.
Heart attacks, strokes, car accidents all happen at night as well. That's an ER that can't be accessed by the local population.
CBC's analysis found a significant drop in unplanned ER closures in 2024 compared to the past 2 years. But this year, more ERs have permanently reduced their hours, mostly in rural Ontario. Nancy Shaw is CEO of the South Bruce Grey Health Centre. It cut hours at 2 small hospitals.
Staffing remains a concern.
The majority of closures was due to a shortage of nurses. The provincial government has pledged money to train more nurses and provide fill-in doctors. But ER closures continue, and not just in Ontario. Dr. Amy Kernick is president of the Canadian Association of Emergency Physicians. She works in BC.
It certainly appears that the situation is worsening across the country. We are seeing more closures year by year.
Doctors, nurses, and advocates worry lives are at risk unless there are system-wide solutions. Julie Ireton, CBC News, Ottawa.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. For more on our top story about the alleged foreign interference into Patrick Brown's Conservative leadership campaign, go to cbcnews.ca. It is on our main page. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. It's Monday morning, and I hope you had a good weekend. It's a little bit brisk out there with some beautiful snow. Thanks for joining us here on CBC. We've got quite a story this hour to share. It comes from the I-Team. Imagine being thrown in jail and strip searched because you did not take your medication. That is what happened to a Manitoba woman with tuberculosis. The I-Team's Caroline Bargood is going to be in here to talk about this. Not only was she thrown in jail, she was held in jail for a month. So Caroline's going to be in to tell us how this happened. Also, we're going to have a closer look at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's weekend meeting with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. And we'll talk about World AIDS Day. It was yesterday, but we're going to talk about how the HIV/AIDS epidemic led to community building for queer Indigenous people in our province. And we'll look at that through someone who lived through the 80s here. Let's go to Heather Wells right now, though, for other news headlines and stories. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, people who are grieving the death of a teenager killed by RCMP in Norway House Cree Nation last month say they want real change. A community petition calls on all levels of government to partner with Indigenous communities to build culturally grounded mental health infrastructure. Also calls for RCMP funding to be diverted towards supporting community-based responses. We'll hear more about what happened and about what they'd like to see happen. Communities in Manitoba's north as well can't wait for the ongoing postal strike to end. Lynn Lake's mayor says Canada Post is an essential service while the community has road access. Big-name couriers like Purolator or UPS do not deliver to his community. Those stories and more coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right. Let's get into this chilly forecast. Abby.
Yes, it's a cold and cloudy one across board. We're going to see a slight chance of flurries flurries in most of the region. Winnipeg, the Red River Valley, Western Manitoba will experience highs between minus 13 and minus 15, with light snow and light winds easing throughout the day. The forecast for Winnipeg today, mostly cloudy. We do have that slight chance of flurries in our forecast. It's going to be light breeze early this morning, and then we'll get to a high of minus 13. Cloudy skies and light snow will start after midnight. Breezy conditions will develop overnight, and we'll see temperatures holding steady near minus 14. And for tomorrow, we're going to see light snow throughout the day. In other region, Westman will be cold and cloudy with a high of around minus 15. We're going to see that snowfall warning in the PAR. We're expecting about 10 to 15 centimeters of snow, making it a cloudy and a snowy day for that region. So across board, we're looking at a chilly one with snow and cloudy forecast in most of the regions. But right now, Winnipeg, we are holding steady at minus 13 for most of the day.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
All right, let's get into the morning commute. It's funny, Corey, because I think I got caught on camera dancing when I was, because I don't mind the cold. I'm kind of fully snuggling in and enjoying it now.
This is like my favorite weather right now. Like when winter's still novel. Like if it was this weather in March, I'd be like, boo.
I know.
But this wet right now, it's magical. It's lovely.
Yeah, it's
Winter
new.
Wonderland vibes leaning into it. Yeah, I love it. And so far, at least, it hasn't caused too many major issues on the commute that I've heard of so far. One thing to keep an eye out for, though, heard from Daniel earlier that if you're coming from the Ret, down the 207, wanting to turn west on the Highway 1 at Deacon's Corner there, real slow going, you kind of lose one of your turning lanes because there's crews doing some kind of work there. Not totally sure what's going on, but so Deacon's Corner might be slow going if you're coming off the 207. Other than that, highways seem to be okay unless you're kind of around Thompson area. Those highways are covered. If you're going to Gillam or you're going to Lynn Lake from Thompson, not great conditions. But if you see anything going on there here in the city or out in the highways, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, let's chat December vibes, shall we?
Mm-hmm.
I asked on Facebook, what'd you do this first weekend in Manitoba? You can see me and my love, Jean-Paul, out taking holiday selfies at some fun events. Valerie Wolbert saying worked for the Salvation Army Christmas kettles and then cleaned her apartment. Alicia Mozets-Kabalovitz said 2.5 weeks worth of laundry, so that's a reason to snuggle in. Rob Jessup was at Pine Ridge Hollow looking around, sent us a picture of a donkey, kind of cute. Leona Mayer saying celebrating the first Sunday in Advent at church and then visited the massive craft sale at the convention center. And Kathleen Noel Black finally writing in here, took my more delicate BC sister to the Leaf to experience warmer climate. So I guess it was too cold out there for her sister. But you have some pictures to go with what you did on the weekend. So if people are on YouTube, you can see these photos, and I think maybe a video even coming up.
Yeah. Well, because it's so my kiddo, Callie's 2, and so this is attending our third Christmas with him. But this feels like it's like the first kind of Christmas.
Describe this photo to them.
So yeah, we got him a tiny little Christmas tree. And we bought some special decorations, little fuzzy animals for him to put onto the Christmas tree.
So it was his?
Yeah, it's his little Christmas tree. And he took it so serious. We put them out, and he meticulously, he was so focused putting every little decoration on there. And we had some Christmas music going. He was singing along Frosty the Snowman, Jingle Bells. He's just leaned into it. And it kind of feels like my first Christmas too. When you're watching your kiddo, there's just that nostalgia, and it's just so wonderful seeing him really enjoy Christmas. It's this new kind of perspective. It's just so nice.
There's this lovely video playing now on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream of the show where he's the little tree they got him is the same height as him.
Yeah.
And you're right, he's very focused.
He's dialed in.
Spacing the
and he went for a solid 10 minutes just let's go.
Spacing every ornament out.
It was amazing. He's so cute.
Because you never know. He could have just thrown it all on this when I was a kid, we could throw it all on one side, it's lopsided.
Yeah, toddlers, it's a toss up what they might do, but he was into it. So he's
cute.
A decorator. Yeah.
So cute. So what'd you do this first December weekend? Let us know. 788-3205 if you'd rather call. Well, let's move into a little bit of history, shall we? When local Two-Spirit elder Albert McLeod moved back home to Manitoba in the early 1980s, the HIV/AIDS epidemic felt as though it was a world away. But then time progressed, and he noticed more and more friends were getting sick. And his world in his community began to rapidly change. He says he didn't know it at the time, but the epidemic would push him and others to protect their rights as queer Indigenous people and lay the foundation for what would become the Two-Spirit movement. Now, we're talking about this because yesterday was World AIDS Day, and today we're taking time to remember how the HIV/AIDS epidemic shaped our city. Albert McLeod joins me now via phone. Good morning.
Morning.
How would you describe that moment in your life in the 1980s, Albert?
Well, there was a lot of fear, and we were young in those days, so we were very, I think, malleable to reality. But the truth is that we were dealing with, end of life, going to hospitals, going to palliative care wards, and really walking with their friends as they slowly died from very serious infections, without any real support from family or community or society. So for about 20 years, we managed that on our own.
It's interesting because obviously I'm old enough to have lived through that time. I was quite young, but I do remember enough about being taught things in schools to try to get that education awareness out there about what AIDS was, what this virus was. But in the introduction, as I was saying, it kind of felt a world away, but not to you. What was it like that here, as you said, those supports weren't there? And you said for 20 years you didn't feel supported. That's incredible.
Oh, yeah. And I was living in Vancouver when the global pandemic of AIDS became known by about 1984. But I had come back in 83 in an attempt to outrun it. But with pandemics, you really can't outrun them, as you know, with COVID-19. And so my friend came back from Vancouver, and he had full-blown AIDS. He came back at 86 and died in 87. So 9 months, and he was 28 when he died. Was in St. Boniface Hospital and essentially died alone. His mother came at the very end, but again, just the fear prevented people from being empathetic or being there at such an important time of your life when you were at the end of your life and you needed closure and support, and no one was there.
There was so much fear. You were living this with friends and going through this. You were only in your 20s when this was all happening.
Oh yeah, and I'm 69 next month. And I was at a gala, Night Circles gala at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, and I saw other people from that era. Not too many, but a few. From the early 80s who had gone through what I had gone through. And I had written a letter to the Minister of Health asking for AIDS Memorial for Winnipeg in September. And I was hoping yesterday on World AIDS Day that the province would announce they would support that, but there was no recognition of that. And the thing is that it's important to remember our histories, our full histories. We're in a period of truth and reconciliation, and AIDS did affect Manitobans. That's the truth. We should have a memorial to recognize those people who struggled through that, in many cases in silence and alone.
How did all of this lay the foundation for the Two-Spirit movement in your view?
Well, there was in Minneapolis in 1988 a gathering around health, particularly of gay men, because of the AIDS crisis. And so 11 Manitobans went down there and joined with them. We decided to continue to gather, and so we've gathered ever since 1988. And the 37th annual gathering just happened in Oklahoma. So we share it with our counterparts in the U.S. And really, it has been a response to the AIDS pandemic and HIV. We've been involved in research, community building, advocacy. So it's probably the longest running queer movements in North America. And it was our response to the pandemic, which was to come together as a community, learn our culture, participate in healing. So to me, it's a phenomenon, really. And, I'm very proud that it is an Indigenous response to the pandemic of HIV and AIDS.
I want to look at the current stats because more than half of those referred to Manitoba's HIV program right now are Indigenous. What goes through your head when you hear that?
Well, I think, we had a consultation a couple of years ago because due to the COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of health resources were shut down, and that enabled the virus to spread quickly. So since 2021, we have 1,015 new cases of HIV in this province, and that's really unprecedented. And a large majority are Indigenous people who are kind of at the bottom rung of health in this province. So, carrying that burden of neglect and racism, and we see it in real time. And the challenge is how do we support these people with a diagnosis to, get their viral load down so they can stay healthy. It's not easy.
The awareness of HIV, I mean, you can't really compare to just to return to the historical context of this, right? I mean, people can't really imagine. You didn't even have a funeral if you died of AIDS here. I understand you would be cremated, like there was so much fear. What would you say is though lacking in awareness right now? Is it what you're referring to there? What is available for treatments and still getting people the what they would need?
We have preventative drugs, that people can have in their blood if they are exposed that will prevent transmission. But we don't really have public awareness campaigns in this province. We're still very conservative province, whether we're NDP, Liberal, or Conservative, around sexuality or drug use. We're a very colonial state, and things like sexuality are, taboo to talk about. So we don't have really effective public awareness campaigns across the board, from here to Churchill, that really inform Manitobans what's going on.
I know. I just want to interject for a minute because the Manitoba government says, Albert, it's invested $8 million in initiatives that they say increase access to care. So it's in addition to that, the awareness sounds like you're focusing on the awareness.
Well, I'd like to see a poster about PrEP, the drug that prevents HIV transmission if you have it in your blood. Right? Did you see any big posters during COVID-19 in downtown Winnipeg?
You're drawing the comparison to what they would have done to explain that virus. Yeah.
Well, no, it's just the stigma and the fear that we're not immune from any virus or bacteria in the world, but we seem to want to live in a bubble, that the cold is going to keep us safe, and that's not true.
Anything to add that you feel is important to say today, Albert, that I haven't asked about?
I think $8 million is not enough. And, you can pull numbers out of the sky, but how do you know that's enough? We delayed for so long, and now we have a crisis in this province, and we need a strategy that we can monitor to be effective.
Appreciate your time today. Thank you so much for being with us.
Great. Thank you.
That's Albert McLeod, Indigenous Cultural Facilitator here in Winnipeg. As mentioned yesterday was World AIDS Day. It is 7:25 a.m. on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Thanks for joining us here with the team. We've got Kevin and Corey and Abby and Heather and Megan and Joni. It is minus 13 in the city of Winnipeg. We're going to be around there for most of the day, and we do have some light flurries falling. Well, let's get to morning sports. Scott Reguer is here live with us now on CBC. Hello, Scott. I want to start in the NHL because fatigue caught up with the Winnipeg Jets. At least that's some of the analysis this morning.
Yeah, playing in the final game of a marathon 6-game road trip, Marcy. The Jets held on to a tie in the game against Dallas before they gave up the winning goal on a partial breakaway. The Jets gave up another goal with the goalie pulled for what ended up being a 3-1 loss. A bit of a revenge game for Stars goalie Jake Ottinger. The last time these two teams met, remember, Ottinger left the ice to the chants of U.S. backup, a reference to the fact that he was outdueled by countryman Connor Mahalabuck. Well, not only did Ottinger only allow one goal, he also got an assist last night on the game winner. Despite all that, and now on a season-high 3-game losing streak, Captain Adam Lowry says there are positives to be taken away.
The battle level, the effort level was there for the most part. Our structure was pretty good. I think it was just a couple mistakes, here and there, and them capitalize on a couple chances and us not, and that's the difference. So disappointed with the result, but you look at the game as a whole, there's some positives we can take out of it, and another quick turnaround. It'll be nice to play in front of the home fans.
Yeah, that home game comes tomorrow night against St. Louis.
Let's stay on the ice. What are your takeaways from the opening weekend of the PWHL season?
Well, that for all of the hype surrounding new rules and venues and team names, the first few games lived up to it. They were all nip and tuck affairs. They were all played in front of impressive crowds, Marcy. For instance, a sellout watched Toronto beat Boston on Saturday. In that game, the first goal of the PWHL season was by Scepter's forward Sarah Nurse in a jailbreak situation. That is the unique rule where if you're shorthanded and you score, that also ends your opponent's power play. Saturday's other game saw Montreal in front of a crowd of better than 10,000 win in a shootout over Ottawa, while yesterday's only game saw New York go to extra time and win in overtime against Minnesota. Alex Carpenter had the winning goal, and it was assisted by Sarah Fillier. Fillier, a phenom who was selected first overall in the draft, was asked her thoughts after getting 2 assists in her pro debut.
I think the media likes to feel like there's pressure, but I like to just show up and play hockey with my friends and have fun. And everyone in that locker room I know pretty well and have crossed paths once or twice, so I felt pretty comfortable coming in and feel like I've played international hockey, college hockey. This is kind of something a little bit in between, so it's definitely going to take a second to get used to, but don't necessarily feel the weight of a ton of pressure coming into play.
Fillier sounding as composed as someone with a psychology degree from Princeton might sound. That maturity and some supreme skill, Marcy, have many believing she will be the heir apparent to Marie-Philippe Poulin as the best female player in the world.
Wow. And it was a memorable weekend in curling, right?
Yeah, how could it not be, I suppose, with the first major tournament held in St. John's, Newfoundland in 8 years. Sadly for the locals, their guy Brad Gushue did not come through as men's champion at the National. That honor went to an international, Scotsman Bruce Moat. You can't blame the fans, though. They did their all for Gushue, including booing one of the legends of the game, Brad Jacobs, when he ousted Gushue in a playoff match. It was also raucous on the Rock yesterday as Rachel Homan topped Sweden's Anna Hasselberg in the women's final. Here's Homan.
I think just being on the East Coast with all the energy in the building, we haven't been in a packed arena like this in a while, so it's amazing. Kudos to Anna and their team. They played phenomenal the whole game. We battled hard and hopefully gave the fans some entertainment.
Yeah, Homan's rink ran the table in St. John's, Marcy, and now has won 23 straight games overall. Gimli's Carrie Anderson, if you're wondering, she lost in the semifinals at the National against Anna Hasselberg.
All right, thank you.
You betcha. That's
Monday Sports with Scott Regehr. He'll join us again tomorrow on the show. In the morning commute, if you need anything, please call us and update the conditions out there, whether you're in the city, another community in Manitoba, or, any of the cities in Manitoba or on the highway. 788-3093 is where you can pass along those updates. Well, coming up, we're going to meet a Winnipeg family who's been decking the halls with boughs of holly months before Christmas, and we'll find out more about their story and why. Your CBC Winnipeg News, though, is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's still minus 13 in downtown Winnipeg. It's warmed up a little bit out at the airport where it's minus 14 right now. Our high today is minus 13. A Manitoba woman with no criminal charges spent a month in jail after public health officials ordered her detained to treat her tuberculosis, even though she wasn't infectious at the time. Geraldine Mason was supposed to spend 3 months behind bars, but she was released last week. The 36-year-old from God's Lake First Nation has no criminal record. Leif Jensen is her lawyer.
Manitoba Health has other options available to it. The legislation grants them very broad powers, and they've chosen to interpret it in the most draconian way imaginable.
That is Leif Jensen, and he says the public health could have placed his client in the hospital or worked with health officials in her community to make sure she took her pills every day. You can hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. People grieving the death of a teenager killed by police in Norway House Cree Nation say they want real change. 17-year-old Elgin Muskego was shot outside a home in that community last month. RCMP say he was holding an edged weapon and didn't stop moving towards police despite being told to stop. But family and community members say police should have used other methods to subdue him. About 100 people held a walk to the Norway House RCMP detachment. Jonathan Michael helped to organize that walk.
That we need to come together and work together, and we need our youth to understand this more than ever, that we're all part of this collective healing, and that there's a lot of work to be done.
A community petition calls on all levels of government to partner with the Indigenous community to build culturally grounded mental health infrastructure. It also calls for RCMP funding to be diverted towards supporting community-based responses. Communities in Manitoba's north can't wait for the ongoing postal strike to end. Lynn Lake Mayor Brandon Dulowich says Canada Post is an essential service. While the community has road access, big-name couriers like Purolator and UPS don't deliver there.
Just for us northern communities, Canada Post is an absolute necessity, and it can't go on without operating. We need it to function as a town.
In a statement yesterday, Canada Post says it presented the Canadian Union of Postal Workers with the framework to reach a deal and end this strike. Thousands of postal workers represented by the union have been on strike since November 15th. Now, the U.S. Postal Service has temporarily suspended accepting mail headed to Canada because of the strike at Canada Post. The U.S. Postal Service is asking customers to refrain from mailing items addressed to Canada until further notice. You can hear more national and international news coming up on World Report at 8 o'clock. Some Manitoba Swifties want the singer to do more to get them into her shows.
Now I'm down bad crying at the gym.
Taylor Swift's Era Tour wraps up this week in Vancouver. That's the Eras Tour. Winnipegger Kira Watson now lives in BC and couldn't score tickets to the BC or the Toronto shows. She wants to see Swift channel Ed Sheeran, who doesn't allow his tickets to be resold above face value.
I find it kind of frustrating that she hasn't done anything to kind of like mitigate that. There's a lot of people who have been fans for a long time who aren't able to see it or can't afford it, or who are spending like tons of money, and also people are getting scammed out of it.
Ticketmaster released a bunch of listening-only tickets last week, starting at $16 for seats behind the stage in Vancouver. Those tickets sold out and are now being resold for more than $1,000. Well, it's time to dust off those skates. Bruna Souza, among the first skaters to hit the ice of the Forks canopy this weekend. She says she skated twice indoors back home in Brazil, but it's nicer in Winnipeg.
Because it's outdoor and we can see the snow everywhere. It's snowing, so it's really cool.
Other skaters at the Forks tell CBC they hope for a colder winter than last year so the ice stays in perfect condition. Well, the Jets' longest road trip of the season is over.
Puck shot, score! Tipped in front, and Lowry has opened the scoring. It's 1-0 Jets.
Adam Lowry in the first period on TSN, but one goal wouldn't cut it as the Jets fall 3-1 to the Dallas Stars. Head coach Scott Arniel says this road trip took its toll.
We got to get home. We got to get home and kind of get in our own beds, kind of hope to refresh, get our minds back to where they need to be for Tuesday night against another divisional opponent.
And that divisional opponent is the St. Louis Blues in town tomorrow night. You can find more Manitoba news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather Walls.
You're welcome.
Well, we are going to continue to have ice skating temperatures. Abby is here now with our regional forecast from CBC.
Definitely, especially in the northern part of the province. It's a bit colder there where we're going to be seeing heavy snow and freezing temperatures that's in the forecast. But for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley, we're looking at temperatures around -13 at this time. Partly cloudy conditions we're seeing outside. which will be the main course for today. We do have a slight chance of flurries in the forecast, and our temperatures will not really move much. We're just going to be around minus 13 for the most of the day. Tonight, we're going to see light snow coming with breezy conditions, and temperatures will be around minus 14. In western Manitoba, we're looking at temperatures at minus 17 in Brandon at this time. Mostly cloudy skies we're seeing. Expect this to stay with you for most of the day. So a slight chance of flurries in the forecast and a high of minus 15. In the south central region, we're looking at temperatures around minus 13 for Morden and surrounding areas. The forecast calls for mostly cloudy skies. We do have that slight chance of flurries in the forecast and a high of around minus 11. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is sitting at minus 20 at this time. Mostly cloudy skies we're seeing. Expect a high of minus 13 with light winds and also a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. Moving to the Interlake region, we're seeing temperatures around minus 11 for Gimli and surrounding areas. The weather for that region will stay mostly cloudy. We do have the slight chance of flurries in the forecast and a high near minus 13. Now, for the Pan Flame Flown, we have temperatures around minus 13 with that snowfall warning in effect. We should see periods of snow today, high of around minus 15. Snow will be up to around 15 centimeters starting this afternoon. And for Thompson and Churchill, we're looking at minus 24 in Thompson, minus 23 in Churchill. Thompson will see a mix of sun and clouds, while Churchill is currently seeing ice crystals today, and we're going to see highs around minus 22 and minus 19 for both regions. But for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley, we're looking at mostly cloudy skies, light snow, and a high of minus 13.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's get into the commute.
Yeah, so far no major issues out there, but on the highway though, might want to flag, especially if you're coming into the city from Lorette today. Daniel says that if you're trying to turn west onto Highway 1 right at Deacon's Corner there off the 207, that it is down to one lane. There seems to be some crews doing some work around there, and that's got things pretty backed up. So just heads up there. Thanks for that call, Daniel. But if you see anything else going on, if you're walking, biking, driving, you see something, give me a call, 204-788-3093.
All right, thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, it is officially December, so that means for a lot of people it's time to break out the holiday decor and decorations. Unless, of course, you're Juliet Dayanghiran Francisco. The Filipino Winnipegger's home has been ablaze with Christmas lights and decorations and holiday cheer for several weeks already. It's all part of a joyous cultural tradition, she says. Juliet's story is the subject of a new short documentary by students in the Create program at Sisler High School in collaboration with us here at CBC Manitoba. Sisler's post-high school program trains students in the creative digital arts, including filmmaking. Create students Raiden Dumoran, Joseph Huntington, and Ewan Webster produced the new short video. Here now is the story featuring the voices of Juliet Dayanghiran Francisco and her niece, Chloe Dayanghiran Francisco.
If I can guess my decoration in my Christmas tree, maybe it's around 60 or more than. In the Philippines, we decorate as early as we can in September. When September 1 comes, so we started to decorate. I noticed for 21 years here in Canada, it's big different. Because in the Philippines, we have our culture, like it is the world longest Christmas celebration. There are lots of Filipino community here in Winnipeg, just to remind them not to forget our tradition, our culture in the Philippines, and also to show that this is our culture. So we love our culture wherever we go. The Holy Family, Joseph, Mary, and baby Jesus was born in Bethlehem. I feel very, very great and then full of joy in my heart. Even I came from work, I'm so tired, but if I'm thinking of the decoration, I need to finish this so that I can give good ambience to my community or to my neighborhood. And I asked my nephew to help me. Christmas is love. Because in love, you can give everything. You can share your blessing. you will be reminded of the birth of Christ, and you will be good to people, and you can extend your, your passion, and love can do everything.
I think Christmas is a time to celebrate, of course, the birth of baby Jesus. And it's just a time to have with your family and just spending that time we have together, because I know we are fortunate enough to have family around us, because I know not a lot of people do have that time. We do a lot of big things, so I think it's important for other cultures to see that and see for them to learn what we do and what we believe in and our spirit for it.
Parol is the Tagalog term for star or Star of Bethlehem. So this is the design of the parol made in the Philippines. And I can say that Christmas is so very important for us. So I can advise people, even though it's not Filipino, to join us Filipino to celebrate, because it's the way we can share our blessing for the whole year to other people who need it.
That's a lot of lights, man. If you were watching the YouTube video, the beautiful doc that was created by the Sisler students, what a beautiful display. What a lot of work. Those are the voices of Juliet Dayang Hiran Francisco and her niece Chloe Dayang Hiran Francisco. The story produced by Sisler Create students Raiden Dumoran, Joseph Huntington, and Ewan Webster in collaboration with us here at CBC Manitoba. Please go to our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba, or tune into CBC Television News at 6 tonight to watch more of that and to hear more of the story. We actually have a traffic update for you now. It's 7:42 Monday morning. Corey's popped in.
Yeah, King Edward at Notre Dame. So it's obviously heading northbound. There's a multi-vehicle collision in the curb lane. So just heads up, there are emergency crews on scene. Keep left to get around that. Wouldn't be surprised if that's causing some pretty big delays this morning. That's King Edward at Notre Dame. Keep left to get around that. If you see anything else going on out there, 204-788-3093.
Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, next on the show, let's look at politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau had a surprise meeting and dinner with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. They met at Mar-a-Lago, Trump's Florida estate, Friday in the wake of threats that the president-elect would impose tariffs on products entering the states, including from Canada. To talk about what was discussed, because we actually have quite a bit of detail, I understand, Colin Robertson spoke with me at 6 this morning. He's a former Canadian diplomat and fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute.
Good to be with you again, Marcy.
So what do we know about the key topics, Colin, on the table at this dinner?
Marcy, we actually know a fair bit. Dominic LeBlanc, who was with the Prime Minister, our Public Safety Minister, sat down with Rosemary Barton on Sunday and gave a pretty good debrief. And more importantly, the man himself, Donald Trump, tweeted out a long piece about what he discussed with the Prime Minister. So we know they talked about trade. We know they talked about security. We know they talked about fentanyl and legal migrants. They talked about the Arctic. They apparently talked about gas and oil and pipelines. And as Dominic LeBlanc reported, they talked about other foreign leaders. So it sounded like it was about a 3-hour dinner with about a dozen other people, including some key players that will be part of the new Trump administration. His national security advisor, his interior secretary and energy czar, and the commerce secretary who will handle trade negotiations. So from a Canadian perspective, having the Prime Minister there with Dominic LeBlanc and his Chief of Staff, Katie Telford, it doesn't get better than that, and it's a perfect way for the Prime Minister to finish what had begun as a pretty rocky week last week with the tweet that Trump planned to put big tariffs on Canada and Mexico and to some degree on China because of what he felt Canada and Mexico being the source of fentanyl in particular, as well as legal migrants.
I don't remember ever analyzing a dinner like this before. How unusual was the move on Trudeau's part to go to Mar-a-Lago ahead of Trump's inauguration?
Well, apparently after the tweet came out, the Prime Minister phoned the President. The President said, talked and then said, why don't you come down to Mar-a-Lago on Friday? Again, unusual because normally, particularly with cabinet nominees, they go into Purdue until after they're confirmed by the Senate. But Trump is, if nothing, unorthodox. And I think responding to unorthodox, you take unorthodox approach as well. So Prime Minister going down, he's the first G7 leader to go down, actually one of the first leaders to see the president since his election. That only serves Canadian interests. And of course, it's also the premiers when the Prime Minister had their virtual meeting last week, the premiers were all pretty insistent that the Prime Minister take action. So this is action, and, well, the President didn't say he was going to lift the tariffs, and he may not lift the tariffs. At least the situation has moved along, and contacts have been made with key players that will serve us well going into the coming months.
Trump has stated that illegal immigration and drug smuggling are his primary border concerns. How much can Canada do to help tackle some of the issues?
Well, the Prime Minister has already said, and Dominic LeBlanc reported that PM is going to increase helicopter overflights, for example. There'll be more money going to border security, and not just the land border, but also what comes in, because one of the things Trump's concerned about is import, particularly of fentanyl and things. And it's a big problem for Canada as well. So again, the proportion of people who die from fentanyl in Canada, it's pretty much the same in Canada and the United States. So we have shared interest in that, and we have shared interest in keeping out people who shouldn't be here. And this goes back to, of course, after 9/11, when John Manley and Tom Ridge negotiated the Smart Border Accord, and we've really taken a perimeter approach ever since Canada and the United States. So it's, in that sense, it's simply strengthening a policy that is already in place and actually serves both countries well. The Americans would like to have more information sharing. They'd like us to give them a list of convicted child molesters, and I can't figure out why we wouldn't do that. A few years ago, the Americans said that, look, if your planes come in our territory, and most Air Canada and WestJet planes too, as you're crossing over, give us the manifest list. And we said no, well, for privacy reasons. And they said, well, fine, don't go into our airspace while we now provide that information. I think that sharing relationship and the fact that we do have a joint interest in keeping out bad drugs and bad people, it makes sense that we would cooperate.
You already mentioned, Colin, there was no definitive backing away from tariffs on Trump's part. Was there any indication that was given that he may, he's willing to talk about the number, like the 25%, because he ran on 10% tariffs and then he came out with his 25%, Canada being involved. Do we have a sense of whether or not anything was achieved on that front?
No, I think, though, everything is negotiable. And I think back to Shinzo Abe when Trump first went in 2017, and Trump said, I'm going to put massive tariffs on Japan because we've got a trade imbalance. So Shinzo Abe, like Trudeau, goes to see Trump before he's taking office, brings with him a gold-headed putter, goes to Trump Tower. The two of them hit it off, and probably the best relationship with any G7 leader that Trump had was with Shinzo Abe. And the tariffs that were threatened were never actually applied to Japan. So we will see. I think Trump will keep these threats out there to motivate what he sees as action. And if you read his Art of the Deal, this is how he operates. He makes threats. He thinks of himself as a kind of master negotiator, and bluff is a big part of what he does. But in his case, he has the capacity to follow through with the bluffs.
We'll leave it there this morning, Colin, unless there's anything I didn't ask you about that's important to mention about the meeting.
No, I think, what is important is that they met and that personal relationship is reestablished. Despite, a lot of media criticism saying, well, the Prime Minister and the President don't get along, the President doesn't like the Prime Minister. I think that with Trump, it's all transactional. And I think that he's dissed a lot of people, but, his Vice President, for example, once called him a fascist. So I think Trudeau understands the President, and getting down there and seeing him this early, that's good news for Canada.
We'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
Colin Robertson is a fellow at the Canadian Global Affairs Institute and a former Canadian diplomat.
This winter, help us make the season kind by supporting Harvest Manitoba. I'm Vince Barletta, CEO of Harvest Manitoba. All it takes is one can of food, $1, or even 1 hour of your time. Join CBC as we donate a day of programming in support of Harvest Manitoba December 6th. Find ways to give to Harvest Manitoba at cbc.ca/kindmb.
Time right now is 10 to 8 on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. It's minus 13 in the city. We're going to be there for most of the day, but with wind chill, it'll feel more like minus 27. So it's not a day to forget your mitts. And if you're already out there walking or standing at the bus stop, then you know this. Well, let's build on today's top story that you've been hearing in the local news about a Manitoba woman who said she was held in jail for a month because she missed taking doses of her tuberculosis medication. The mother of three has no criminal record. She was never charged with a crime, but Manitoba Public Health decided to incarcerate her instead of placing her in a hospital. The I-Team's Caroline Bargout has been looking into this story. She does join us now in studio. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
We're just going to get your mic up there, Caroline. Hi.
Hi.
How did this happen?
Well, Geraldine Mason is 36 years old, and she lives on God's Lake First Nation. She has 3 kids. She has a grandson. She first contracted tuberculosis 19 years ago, but she's had it twice since then. She actually doesn't know how she got it. Now, tuberculosis is a very serious illness, and it affects mainly the lungs. Now, it could be deadly if it's not treated. But of course, there is antibiotics for it. The disease is spread through droplets, but it can be cured with consistent use of the antibiotics. Now, Mason once inadvertently gave tuberculosis to a couple of family members. Now, she didn't know that she had at the time. She regularly took her medication, but she admits sometimes she'd miss a dose here or there. Now, public health officials were really concerned that without treatment, if she didn't take treatment for too long, that her disease would become resistant to medication. So they got an order under the Public Health Act to actually send her to jail. And even though she wasn't contagious at the time, they got this order. So when she and her boyfriend came to Winnipeg in October for a dental appointment, she was picked up by Winnipeg police.
I don't know, I just said, how is this going to work? Like, where are you guys going to take me, and how long am I going to be, like, kept for? Because I thought it'd be just like a overnight kind of thing, or even just a couple hours. I don't know. I didn't know what to think. I was scared.
Now, Mason says that Winnipeg police officers who had picked her up, they weren't even sure where to take her. So they ended up taking her to their police headquarters downtown.
What happened to her from there?
From there, she was actually strip searched. So she strip searched and then detained in a police holding cell. Then she was sent to the remand center where she was strip searched again. Now, remember, this is a woman who was not charged or convicted with a crime. In fact, she's never had any involvement with the criminal justice system. She stayed at the remand for about a week. And at one point, she needed to go to get a lung x-ray at HSC. So they shackled her and handcuffed her, took her there. When she was returned back to remand, she was strip searched again. Then remand got overcrowded, so they ended up sending her to Headingley, or to the Women's Correctional Center, which is located in Headingley. She was strip searched for a 4th time there. In all, she spent a total of 32 days in jail. Leif Jensen is her legal aid lawyer.
I think it's important just to recognize what happened here. Manitoba felt it was important for her to take a pill once a day. That's fine. They locked her in a room for 24 hours a day in order to have someone watch her take a pill for 10 seconds a day. That's what happened here. And that was wildly excessive.
He says that public health officials had many other options and they did not have to send her to jail.
So let's walk through that. What other options did public health officials have?
So they could have ordered her to go to a hospital where she could take her medication, or they could have placed her in isolation somewhere, perhaps even in her community of God's Lake. They didn't have to order her to go to jail. Now, her original release date was actually January 27th, which meant she would have spent Christmas and New Year's in jail. Her lawyer filed an application to have her released. Then CBC asked to interview her in jail. Now, last Thursday, she was let out. That was a day before we were supposed to interview her. The Canadian Civil Liberties Association is now monitoring this case. Harini Sivalingam is the director of Equality.
Detaining someone in prison in a general population who, to our knowledge, has no criminal history, has never been uncooperative at a hospital, is not contagious for public safety or public health reasons, is deeply alarming. There is no justifiable reason for someone to be detained in a prison for purely public health reasons.
So here's part of the issue, is that Mason had to take her medication in front of health officials. So if she was busy, for example, or if she needed to do housework, she would try to delay when she would take the medication because it made her really nauseous. And if she took it before having a chance to do the things she needed to do, she didn't think she'd be able to do it. But sometimes by the time she'd be finished, it's after 5 p.m. Well, the nursing station is now closed. And if she doesn't take her medication in front of health officials, they assume that she didn't do it.
What happens now that she's now that she's out?
Well, Mason was super excited to get out of jail. She ended up spending a few nights here in Winnipeg before she can get a flight back home. She was supposed to go back this weekend. I hope that she did make it back. She's going to have to take her pills every day at 1:30. So what they're going to do this time is a health official is going to FaceTime her at 1:30 every day to make sure that she takes her pills. Now, why this wasn't an option before they decided to incarcerate her, that's really unclear. But it would have made life easier on her than having to go through this ordeal. Now, here's her lawyer, Leif Jensen, again.
In Canada, we really value liberty and individual freedom and civil rights, and these are so important, and it's really important that these things exist. And if we start chipping away at them, and if we start putting people in jail, which is the most serious thing we can do to someone for these sorts of reasons, then we're setting incredibly dangerous precedents.
How often does this happen?
We don't actually know. Provincial spokesperson said that they are rare, but they couldn't tell us exactly how often this happens every year because it's not centrally tracked. Now, they said that there's only a single case occurring within a calendar year. Sometimes there's no cases at all. We know of at least 2 other cases through media searches. We know in 2008, a Manitoba woman with tuberculosis was incarcerated in Winnipeg after she repeatedly ran away from the hospital for treatment. In 2011, another patient with tuberculosis was jailed. That time, the medical officer of health told the media that it happened between 5 and 10 times over the past few years. As for Geraldine Mason, she is really looking forward to being home with her kids.
I was lonely. I felt more lonely thinking I was going to spend Christmas in there, the holidays. I'm super excited. I can't even wait to get home. I'm going to go see my son and my grandson. Yeah. And my daughter. I'm so excited.
She really hopes that by telling her story, this will not happen to anyone else.
What a story it is.
It is, isn't it?
Thank you, Caroline. Yes. Thanks. Caroline Bargut, reporter with CBC Manitoba's I-Team. Now, she will have even more on it tonight at CBC News at 6. You can read about it on our website this morning as well. Heather's here with other headlines.
Good morning. Well, people grieving the death of a teenager killed by police in Norway House last month say they want real change. A community petition calls on all levels of government to partner with Indigenous communities to build culturally grounded mental health infrastructure and also for RCMP funding to be diverted towards supporting community-based responses. Some communities in Manitoba's north can't wait for this ongoing postal strike to end. Lynn Lake's mayor says Canada Post is an essential service. And Pimachikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monias says the First Nation has only a small pharmacy, but other medical supplies come through mail. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
Coming up after 8, the fatal police shooting of a Nunavut man last week has again raised questions about how police use force. Some experts are praising Nordic countries for the way they train their officers. We're going to hear more about that, the focus of communication and de-escalation. Northbound Pembina at Jubilee, overpass, a little slow.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
John Adams doesn't compose your typical operas. Often they're about major events in modern history, like President Nixon going to China. The Pulitzer Prize-winning composer will tell you about his long career in music and why feeling is the driving force.
And that's what music is. It's fundamentally communicating emotion.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The writer Jessica Waite was already in shock after her husband died of a heart attack, but there was more to come when she found that he'd been hiding a lot of very big secrets. A personal tale of complex grief coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Joe Biden has pardoned his son. The U.S. president did an about-face, issuing a full and unconditional pardon for Hunter Biden. He would have been sentenced later this month after being convicted on federal gun and tax charges. Biden had previously said that he would not pardon his son for his crimes. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. Richard, what does this mean?
Yeah, this means Hunter Biden won't face any jail time after his father signed that sweeping pardon that absolves Hunter for all and any possible crimes he may have committed in the last 10 years. Now, this is a major reversal for President Joe Biden, who repeatedly promised he wouldn't interfere with his son's case, saying nobody is above the law. But apparently, when it comes to his family, that has now changed. And Biden's statement late last night almost sounds like something Donald Trump would say. Biden blames his political opponents and unfair prosecution, writing Hunter was singled out only because he is my son, and that is wrong. Take a listen to political analyst Julian Zelizer.
He's worried about how Trump will use presidential power. And he's decided to reverse this and protect family. So I think President Biden is willing to live with the inconsistency and the change in position to protect his son.
Now, Biden reportedly made this stunning decision after spending Thanksgiving weekend with his family, and it marks one of his final acts as president before leaving office and public life.
So what's been the reaction to all of this?
Yeah, there's been harsh criticism on both sides of the aisle, accusing Biden of lying and hypocrisy. One Democrat saying Hunter Biden is a convicted felon and his case wasn't politically motivated. Incoming President Donald Trump also joined in the chorus, calling it an abuse and miscarriage of justice. Trump even questioning if the pardon should include January 6 protesters. Trump takes office in just under 2 months, and Biden's pardon soon gives Trump the cover should he decide to pardon his allies.
All right, thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. More than 200 additional deaths are being linked to residential schools in Ontario. The deaths were previously unknown to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission or its successor, but the coroner's office began investigating back in 2021, shortly after potential unmarked graves were found in Kamloops, BC. Brett Forrester has more on the project.
We're bringing answers to families that never had them.
That's what it's all about for Provincial Police Sergeant Mark Makisock. He's the leader of the Residential Schools Death Investigation Team at the Office of Ontario's Chief Coroner. And since 2021, his team's been parsing through public and protected records while consulting newspapers, genealogical databases, and ancestry websites, all to help those families find loved ones lost at Indian residential schools. Chief Coroner Dr. Dirk Heyer explains.
What we're doing is completely consistent with the work that was started by the Truth and Reconciliation, and we're carrying that forward in a way that provides more answers.
Heyer's office has now confirmed 220 additional deaths linked to the institutions in the province. Those deaths were previously unknown to the National Centre for Truth and Reconciliation. The centre lists 436 deaths in Ontario, bringing the combined total to 656 to date. Significant, but no surprise to people on the ground like Laura Arndt. She's executive lead for the Survivors Secretariat, representing survivors of the former Mohawk Institute Residential School in Brantford, Ontario. In just 2.5 years, her group has more than doubled the number of known deaths there from 48 to 101.
That forensic nature being applied to records and documents, I think, is a critical skill set that's needed.
The Reconciliation Centre, meanwhile, says it supports the coroner's work and will continue to add names to its memorial as they're provided. Brett Forrester, CBC News, Ottawa.
Western leaders are calling for the conflict in Syria to de-escalate, but government forces are fighting fiercely to regain control of the northern cities Aleppo and Idlib. Russian and Syrian government planes are launching airstrikes on the region, and there are reports Iranian-backed militias have also arrived in the country to support them. Our senior international correspondent, Margaret Evans, has more from neighboring Lebanon.
The Syrian President Bashar al-Assad has vowed to destroy the insurgents. Syrian and Russian airstrikes on rebel-held areas continuing. The Syrian White Helmets, a volunteer group based in opposition territory, released this video of their first responders putting out cars on fire after an airstrike reportedly hit near Aleppo's University Hospital yesterday. But it's clear the rebels' lightning offensive on the city took Damascus by surprise. The Islamist Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, in control of much of Idlib province, led an offensive supported by other Turkish-backed opposition groups. Al-Assad's main supporter here in neighboring Lebanon, the militant group Hezbollah, has been weakened by its war with Israel, while another of his backers, Russia, which helped him retake Aleppo in 2016, is distracted by the war in Ukraine.
The Syrian civil war never ended, and it's been unfrozen by geopolitical events outside Syria.
Former British intelligence chief Alex Younger says rebel groups are clearly taking advantage of al-Assad's weakened state.
It took Bashar nearly 4 years to get Aleppo back, and he lost it in a day.
It's also led to reported fighting between the Turkish-backed rebels and US-backed Kurdish groups controlling parts of northeastern Syria, and credited with the defeat of ISIS. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Beirut.
Protesters clash with police on the streets of Tbilisi. Some throw fireworks at officers, responding with tear gas. For a fourth straight night, Georgia's capital has been overrun by anti-government demonstrators. They're angry over a decision to pause Georgia's efforts to join the European Union.
We've attended elections, and it was clearly rigged, and we've done everything in our power so far to show that we desire a European future.
We don't want to be part of Russia. We want to be part of Europe, and we want to be part of the best life.
Tensions have been on the rise in Tbilisi since Georgia's election in late October. Many people there say the vote was rigged. They also accuse Russia of interfering in the election. The International Court of Justice is now hearing submissions in a landmark case on climate change. It's examining how countries should protect the environment from damaging carbon emissions and what the consequences should be if they do not. This case is something vulnerable island nations have been lobbying for years. ICJ opinions are non-binding, but they are legally and politically significant. More than 100 countries and organizations have signed up to make submissions in The Hague, and Canada is due to make its case tomorrow. The CEO of Rogers Communication will be in the hot seat today. He has been summoned to Ottawa by members of Parliament to address allegations of unfair business practices. This is the latest development in a story that began with our CBC Go Public team. They fielded several customer complaints about misleading contracts. The CBC's Erica Johnson has more.
Rogers CEO Tony Staffieri likely knows he'll be grilled this afternoon when he testifies before the Standing Committee on Industry and Technology. He was invited to appear last week, but was a no-show. Instead, sent another executive, firing up MPs like Conservative Michelle Rempel-Garner.
This committee needs to send a message to Canadian consumers that we're on their side, not the side of the CEO. We're done with this obfuscation.
Conservative MP Jeremy Patzer wasn't happy either.
The level of disrespect that the CEO is showing to Parliament, to Canadians, to ratepayers, to this institution is unbelievable.
NDP MP Brian Massey first called for Staffieri to appear, concerned, he said, after we reported hearing from hundreds of Canadians, many frustrated by clauses in contracts that allow price increases while they're locked in.
People, can't surf through on their phones endless pages of all these different types of clauses and expect to always pick them out from everything that they're purchasing and buying.
The CRTC is concerned too. Scott Hutton says the regulator is now holding public consultations.
To put in place new rules to actually correct the root cause of what's in the contract.
After Staffieri skipped the scheduled appearance, MPs issued a summons. A Rogers spokesperson says the CEO will attend this time, apparently by video conference. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcus, and this is Information Radio. Welcome to the Monday Morning Show. Thanks so much for spending time with us here on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube. 8:10 a.m. is a time. It's been pretty cold with wind chill especially. It's felt kind of around minus 27 out there. Abby will have a full look at our forecast momentarily. Well, this half hour on the program, the death of a Nunavut man shot by Winnipeg police has brought the concept of use of force back into question. Experts are pointing toward Nordic countries for their exemplary models for police education. They study for 3 years to be officers, for example. We're going to talk to a professor from the Norwegian Police University College about what makes their education different and what he says Manitoba might learn from their system. So stay tuned for that. Also, it's a little bit slick out there, and we've got some issues in traffic as well. So Corey is going to be in a moment as well to update how your commute's going. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who's got our news updates. Good morning.
Good morning. A Manitoba woman with no criminal charges spent a month in jail after public health officials ordered her detained to treat her tuberculosis. That even though she was not infectious at the time. Geraldine Mason, a 36-year-old from God's Lake First Nation, has no criminal record. Her lawyer says public health could have placed his client in the hospital or worked with health officials in her community to make sure she took her pills every day. We're going to hear more from him coming up. And people in Norway House Cree Nation are calling for change after a 17-year-old boy was killed by an RCMP officer last month. Your next local news coming up at 8:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
All right, let's get into what's going on in the forecast. It's December now. Abby, what do we have for today?
Yes, we're looking at temperatures ranging from minus 23 in the north to minus 11 down south, with most areas will be seeing cloudy conditions and a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. The winds will be light though in most of these regions, and then we'll experience some breezy conditions in the north and the western part of the province. Snow is expected in parts of the province also. Right now, Winnipeg, minus 13. It is clear outside. The forecast for Winnipeg and the Red River Valley calls for mainly cloudy conditions with a slight chance of flurries in the forecast. The winds will ease to light later this morning, and then we'll get to a high of minus 13. Tonight, we're going to see skies stay cloudy with light snow beginning after midnight. Some windy conditions will come from the south overnight, and temperatures will hold steady around minus 14. In western central region, we're looking at cold temperatures, minus 15, minus 11. Parkland and Interlake region, looking at cloudy skies and a slight chance of flurries. And in Flin Flon and the Power, we have that snowfall warning in effect. Right now, Winnipeg, it is minus 13.
Well, I'm okay because behind me in our monitor, I have the fireplace. Ooh.
I'll take
Look,
that.
There's a little CBC stocking. It's got the gem on it.
We should stuff it.
Isn't that? I'll do that. Let's talk later about what we're going to stuff it with. I agree. Who gets to take it, though? Corey? Is it Corey's?
Yeah, I mean, I could play the kids' card.
I love tossing coins.
Okay, we'll flip a coin later.
Nice.
Let's get into the commute. There are some issues out there.
Yeah, I got a call from Michael on the commuter line. Northbound Pembina, right around the Jubilee overpass there. In the left lane, there was a multi-vehicle collision, he says. So keep right to get around that. That's probably causing some backups for folks. So heads up there. As well, if you're on coming from Lorette into Winnipeg today, that 207, right when you're trying to get onto the Highway 1 on Deacon's Corner, you lose your turning lane. There's some crews doing some work there, says Daniel. So just heads up, might be slow going, backed up on the 207, trying to get onto the Highway 1 there. So that is the major issue. But if you see something else going on, if you're walking, bike, and driving, I saw the bike lanes are fairly plowed as well this morning on my way in. So that's good news for cyclists. Give me a call, 204-788-3093.
We have to update something now, actually, that's coming up soon. So it's 8:14 right now, and this is starting at 9 o'clock. What's going on?
Yeah, so there's some work happening on the CBC Springsteen Tower for the next 3 days, actually. So Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, starting at 9 every day until 6. So that means actually our AM signal is going to be completely out during that time. So you're going to have to, if you're an AM listener, you're going to have to lean on the FM signal. So just heads up for folks. So Brandon, it's 97.9 is the FM signal. Thompson, 100.9. And Winnipeg, 89.3. So just heads up there. So sorry about the disruptions. We got to do some maintenance for the next 3 days or so. So FM is your place to go if you want to get in CBC Radio 1 signal.
And Bruce Springsteen jokes are welcome,
yes.
By the way. Corey just said we call that tower the boss. 8:15 is a time, and let's turn to more serious matters. As I alluded to, questions are being raised once again about how police use force when dealing with crisis situations. This is after a Nunavut man was shot dead during a confrontation with Winnipeg police in Unicity last week, and a 17-year-old boy was killed by RCMP in Norway House. Now, Manitoba's police watchdog, the Independent Investigation Unit, is investigating both cases. But we wanted to turn the conversation to the training that police get. In Winnipeg, candidates with a grade 12 education can become constables after 36 weeks of training. RCMP have similar requirements. They go through a 26-week cadet training course and then a 6-month field coaching program. Now, some experts are pointing to Nordic countries for their, quote, exemplary police training methods and models. In Norway, students go through 3 years of training, and officers do not always carry weapons, which focuses on the training, communication, and de-escalation. Rune Glomset is Associate Professor Emeritus with the Norwegian Police University College. He's also a former police officer and specializes in police leadership, and he joins us via Zoom. Hello there.
Hello. Good morning to you from Norway.
Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for asking me.
Can you tell us how the 3-year training in Norway program works? Like, what are the basics of it?
It's divided into 3 parts. The first year, they study at Police University College, a lot of subjects of policing, law, and so on. The second year, they are out in practice, and they have a coach that are following them working in the patrol. And the third year, they're back at the University College, and they're working more to understand more and get more knowledge. And they also use time to write their bachelor degree. Yes. So in Norway, it's in fact the police union that was the main force behind expanding this police education. In my time, we had 2 years, 1 year in the police academy and 1 year in practice. But the union, they wanted more and better education, like the nurses and the teachers.
I'm just really curious, especially given that you teach, but then also you previously were an officer. What's your reaction to hearing that someone here can become a constable after 36 weeks of training?
I'm a bit astonished. It's 2025 soon, and it tells me something about how one look at the work as police officers do and the role in society. So I was also asked some years ago after the killings of George Floyd, and the same thing is in fact happening in the USA. They have very short police education.
Given that it was also asked for the expansion of your program in Norway, it was the police union you said that led the call for the ask. Why would officers, or how do you think officers benefit from that extended training in your country?
They get more competence, and they get more training, and they are more suited to do the kind of tough work in the streets. So it has even been discussed if we should increase the education till 4 years. So and we also at the University College, we have 2 or maybe 3 master's degree in different subjects in police science.
What is the philosophy when it comes to de-escalation? And if you can sort of help us understand why it was developed in that way.
I think it was in about 2015. There was 2 teachers in arresting techniques that wrote a book, and they came up with the power pyramid, and that power pyramid is some kind of both a pedagogical and practical tool used in education and training of police officers. And it starts with presence of the police in different places, and then it's verbal communication, and then it's go up to use of firearms. And this is very much used in the education and also in the annual training for the police officers. And I talked to one police leader earlier this morning, and he told me that this model also gives some kind of safety or security for the police officers when they are going to choose or what kind of means of action. So it is said that you always has to try to use the most least serious means before you get up.
Are officers required to carry a firearm?
No, but the Norwegian police has firearms locked inside the vehicles, and they have to get permission to use it. But we have had for several years now a huge discussion if we should have permanent weapon on every operational officers. So I think maybe next year or the year after we will have a permanent weapon on every operational officer in Norway because of the situations in the streets, the development of the crime and so on.
I was going to ask you that. What's led to the call for officers to potentially be carrying weapons? Yeah.
So it's to be suited to do the work and avoid damage on the public.
How do police in Norway respond to people in crisis and maybe who may be struggling with mental health struggles specifically?
They have training at University College. They use both lectures and also they have cases, and then it's people from the healthcare who are specialists who tells them how to understand this kind of mental diseases and how people react when they have it. And they also train in how to meet and handle them. And when there is a situation in practice, operational, they always try to start with a conversation, and they use time and distance to not start using hard means like firearms. And after every situation, they have briefings and they're discussing what was the situation, how did we choose to solve it, could we use another way to do less harm and so on. So it's high on the priority list within the Norwegian police.
I don't want to leave the impression, however, that that there aren't incidents where people do get shot. I think there is a case that you cite where someone ended up being shot in the leg. What happened there, and as it relates to our conversation, what were the discussions out of it?
It was a situation on last Saturday night in a small town outside Oslo, our capital. And the police were called to a house, and it was said it was some kind of health call. So in my reading of it, I just read it in the newspaper. It was a person with mental health problems that the health service wanted police to come. And when they came to the house, he threatened the police with weapons. So they tried to talk to him, and the talking and keeping the distance stayed for 8 hours. But then he went against the police, and they had to shoot him, and they shot him in one of the legs, not to harm him too much, and that solved the case.
Do you think that...
And of course, our police watchdog will investigate that case.
How well prepared do you feel the police officers in Norway are to handle some of the mental health calls?
I would think that they are pretty good prepared. And that is also the impression I got when I spoke to several police leaders some days ago. So they say that Norwegian police officers are very well prepared to meet those situations. And it is very challenging situations, of course.
How does an unarmed officer, I'm just curious, deal with a person who might have a knife then?
And we have pepper spray and also have telescope batons. So that is some kind of means that you can use, but they are trying to talk but if that doesn't work, then they use the pepper spray or the electroshock weapon. That was also possible. So they are in a way armed to carry out that kind of situations.
How do you feel about the fact that there's a call now for officers to carry guns where you are? I'm just curious what your thinking is there, given we've been talking about your deep history, the calls to even increase education, but that will be how much? What are you thinking about that?
My personal view has been that the Norwegian police should be unarmed, but I have changed my mind. The situation, the crime is getting way more tough, so the police has to be prepared, and they don't have the time to get a permission and lock up the locked box in the car. So I think it's reasonable now that the Norwegian police are going to be armed.
What do you think Manitoba might learn from how Norway police are, how your system works and how the training works?
I would focus on recruitment. What kind of people are you letting in to the police, and what kind of people do you don't want to have there? That is one thing. And then I would say that education, you should discuss how to increase the education like it is in Finland and Norway. I think a very thorough education is important. And I would also recommend that the police in your country have annual training programs where people has to go through operational and tactical and guns and so on, and also has to pass a test like we do in Norway. So we have, for some officers, operational officers, they have at least 48 hours of training yearly, and the other group has more than 100 hours yearly training. And also I would recommend that you formalize briefings in every police district, and it's very important to focus on leadership. The leaders, they shape the culture. They can be role models and so on. So recruitment, education, annual trainings, and leadership, that is very important. And maybe you should make your own power pyramid. That is a very necessary tool here in Norway.
Thank you very much. You've given us so much to think about here, and we're just awaiting actually still the announcement of who our new police chief in Winnipeg at least is going to be. So appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
That is Rune Glomstedt, an associate professor emeritus at the Norwegian Police University College and former police officer. What an interesting interview, Corey. I've done a lot of interviews about police use of force, other systems have gone around the world, but I've never heard something so comprehensive in terms of the system, the training, and even to hear how they're shifting and their officers are talking about carrying weapons. So, I mean, there's some realities there that are shared around the globe about the, what officers are facing on the job, but just really interesting to hear how vastly different the training is, especially, how you deal with weapons and such. Let's get into a quick note here. You're in studio because we need to just remind listeners of something happening at 9 a.m.
Yeah, if you're listening on the AM signal 990, it's going to go out sometime in the next 10 minutes or so. That's because there's maintenance happening at our Springsteen Tower, aka the Boss Tower, we're calling it. And that's actually for the next 3 days. So from today until Wednesday, from about 8:35 or so until 6 p.m., it's going to be out. So FM is going to be your only way to really listen during that time. time to CBC Radio 1. So, Brandon, your FM signal, if you're wondering, 97.9. So, you're going to want to dial into that if you're an AM listener. Thompson, it's 100.9 you're going to want to tune into. And here in Winnipeg, 89.3. If you need anything else, though, also cbc.ca/radio/frequency tells you all the frequencies across the province. You can go to that, too, if you're wondering how to tune in on an FM signal in the meantime.
The CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is clear out there. Minus 13 right now in downtown Winnipeg, and that is our high for the day. Imagine being thrown in jail and strip searched, all because you didn't take your medication. It happened to a Manitoba woman with tuberculosis. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargoot explains.
Geraldine Mason has never been charged with a crime and has had no involvement with the criminal justice system. So imagine what it would have been like for her to be thrown in jail for 32 days, all because she had tuberculosis and missed a couple of doses. TB, as it's known, is a serious illness that mainly affects the lungs. It can be deadly if not treated. Mason regularly took her medication, but sometimes would miss a dose here or there. Public health officials were concerned if she went without treatment for too long, her disease would become resistant to medication. So they got an order to put her in jail, alongside violent offenders.
I was scared, obviously. I was in my room most of the time, which sucked.
Her lawyer said there were other options, like placing her in hospital or working with health officials in her community of God's Lake. Mason was supposed to stay in jail for 3 months, but was released on Thursday after her lawyer filed an application.
I'm super excited. I can't even wait to get home.
Now a health official will FaceTime her every day to make sure she takes her pills. Why that wasn't an option before is unclear. Caroline Bargoot, CBC News, Winnipeg.
People in Norway House Cree Nation are calling for change after a 17-year-old boy was killed by an RCMP officer last month. Elgin Muskego was shot outside a home in that community. RCMP say he had an edged weapon and didn't stop moving towards police despite being told to. The news brought a swell of emotions for the family of another Norway House teen, a non-verbal boy who was tasered by RCMP in April. Heather Anderson is his aunt.
It broke my heart hearing about it, and something should have been done when my nephew was a victim of the RCMP.
Anderson says if RCMP continue working in the community, they should be under more supervision. Northern Manitoba communities hope the ongoing postal strike ends soon. Pimachikamak Cree Nation Chief David Monias is paying close attention to all the developments. He says the First Nations community has a small pharmacy, but other medical supplies come in by mail. People in his community also rely on Canada Post for the delivery of checks for social assistance, pensions, and health benefits.
We have critical supplies that come in for our nation, and we really rely on postal services to deliver those necessities.
The province has opened locations to drop off and pick up essential mail like checks. Canada Post also says in a statement it has presented the Canadian Union with Postal Workers the framework to reach a deal and end the strike. Some fans of Taylor Swift aren't shaking this one off. They couldn't get tickets to one of the final shows of the Eras Tour. Swift's tour wraps up in Vancouver this week following 6 shows in Toronto. Kira Lang lives in Lockport. She says she signed up for all the pre-sales for both shows, had 25 to 30 friends do so as well on her behalf. Even with the help, she says she didn't get a code to buy a ticket, nor did anyone else she knows, but she says lots of scalpers did.
They're on StubHub and people are already trying to sell them for like $2,000 for the nosebleeds. And like as a huge fan and someone like I haven't seen Taylor since her Fearless tour back in like 2010. So I was literally 10 years old the last time I saw Taylor.
Lang wants the federal government to step in and regulate ticket prices so corporations like Ticketmaster can improve the buyer experience and help eliminate scalpers. Time to dust off those skates. Bruna Souza, among the first skaters to hit the ice of the Forks canopy over the weekend. Souza says she skated twice indoors back home in Brazil, but it's nicer in Winnipeg.
Because it's outdoor and we can see the snow,
everywhere. It's snowing, so it's really cool.
Other skaters at the Forks tell CBC they hope for a colder winter than last year's so the ice stays in perfect condition. And Oxford University Press is out with its word of the year, brain rot. It's defined as the supposed deterioration of a person's mental or intellectual state, especially from consuming too much low-grade online content. You can find some great online content at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Yeah, I was going to say, we won't rot your brain, we promise.
No, you'll
promise.
love it. You'll learn so much.
Brain rot.
Yes.
Wow. Manifestation and brain rot. Manifesting brain rot. All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
That was one of the other words of the year. I always love this time of year. All right, let's get into a final look at the commute. Corey, what do you want to say?
Northbound Pembina at the Jubilee overpass. In the left lane, there has been a 3-car collision we heard from Michael earlier. So just keep right to get around that. Might be some backups there. That's the mostly major issue that I've heard of so far.
Abby.
We're looking at a cold day with cloudy conditions and a slight chance of flurries in most regions. Winnipeg, the Red River Valley, Western Manitoba will see highs around -13 to -15. And then we have that snowfall warning in the Par and Flin Flon. We should be seeing about 15 centimeters of snow once the system comes through.
Well, let's talk tipping. Whether you love it, whether you loathe it, whether you're sick of the prompts, whether you think they're a great thing and that's the way that you get paid, maybe. Call in. That's the Radio Noon call-in between 12:30 and 1. And you can call now 788-3797 and leave a message. You have been writing like crazy. We just ran out of time here. We asked what you did in the first weekend of December in Manitoba, and people out for walks and choirs and shows and just enjoying the season, the sights and sounds in our beautiful province. So if you want to weigh in and see some of that loveliness, you can go to my Marcy Marcusa page that acts as a show page during the show. And we hope you tune in tomorrow, once again, to Information Radio. Take care, be well, stay warm today. And coming up next on 89.3 FM, it's The Current on CBC.